Good morning, all of you. So this is our last lecture, that is lecture number 5, in which we are going to discuss about what? Climate change, along with what? The different international conventions that is being initiated for the purpose of controlling climate change. Basically what? Global warming. We are talking about the greenhouse gases. Okay. Now, see, in this session, this time which one is important? This time your COP30 is very much important. Okay. Okay. This time conference of party 30 is very much important, and apart from that you can see that last time there was a question asked regarding what the articles in Paris summit, Paris agreement itself. Okay, because when you talk about the Paris climate change, it's a living agreement. It's a what? Living agreement. For example, we are living beings. We grow and we tend to become old. But when you talk about the Paris climate change, it's a living organism that tends to grow younger. For example, it has been initiated in what? 2015 itself, Paris climate change. What was the target? Our target was to reduce the temperature of the earth below 2 degrees Celsius, but definitely we are, with a different sort of initiative, we will be trying to keep the temperature in the range within 1.5 degrees Celsius. But still, till COP30, okay, we are, the India, when you talk about the Indian government itself, it has its own national determined contribution indices, and it is trying to limit its temperature below 1.5 degree Celsius. That means what? When you talk about the Paris climate change, it's a what? Living agreement. It's a living organism, tends to be grow. For example, till conference of party 30, we are still trying to be within the ranges of temperature 1.5 degrees Celsius. We are taking different initiatives. So this time, write it down. Important. Okay, the different agreements evolved during different COPs. COP 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. In Paris agreement. In Paris agreement, okay, last time the UPSC has asked the question regarding the article. Is it? So see, one such type of article based question it will be coming, it will be very much easy in nature. Just you must know what is it. Okay, and apart from that, COP30. Write down COP30, Conference of Party 30. India's initiative in COP30. Okay, the rest we will discuss. India's initiative in COP30. Okay, so definitely you will see 2 questions from this particular session. 2 questions it will be definitely coming. Okay, now in this particular session, lots of points, lots of things to memorize, and because of that I have highlighted the things what you have to study. Okay, go through this, and after that, after 7 days, I think your economic classes will get over. In the meantime, I will prepare the 100 questions from there. From this particular session itself, we will be practicing more than 20 to 25 questions, because in this, from this particular session, approximately I feel 2 to 3 questions definitely will be asked. Out of 15 chunks of questions, if you are getting 2 to 3 questions, that seems to be very much important. Okay. Are you aware of it? The historical perspective, the historical development. Are you aware of it? Sasi? Historical development, formation of Paris Agreement, Paris Climate Summit, Kyoto Protocol. आप लोगों ने कुछ पढ़ा है? Are you a bit aware of it? Can you connect? Yes or no? Okay, not an issue. I was quite aware of it, and because of this, I have just synchronized the session completely. It is being synchronized, but just read those points where I am emphasizing. Okay, the older questions it won't ask. UPSC has certain limitations of 15 questions, and from this particular session, they will be asking 2 questions. So obviously, it won't be asking what? PBS based question. Yes, COP30, it can be integrated with the Paris Agreement, because what we have discussed, Paris Agreement is what? It's a living agreement. It grows and it becomes younger. We will discuss how it is so. Okay? So within half an hour, we will be completing the previous past, the historical development, the different bodies that are being initiated. After that, we will be talking about the current affair, because it's a crash course. So definitely we will be emphasizing more on this. And don't worry, it's my responsibility. I will be moving from here to Delhi, but within 8 days you will be getting 100 sorts of question. And see, I cannot promise, I cannot commit, because एक कहावत है ना, एक बार कमिटमेंट दे दिया तो फिर पीछे नहीं हटने का. बट डेफिनेटली कोशिश ये रहेगी कि आउट ऑफ दोस 100 क्वेश्चंस विल बी डेफिनेटली गेटिंग सर्टेन क्वेश्चंस. ठीक है. सो okay, just go through it, the factual things. First, the first conference that has recognized the climate change, that means what? We should recognize the drawback of greenhouse gases. The greenhouse gases, it is responsible for what? Global warming. And because of this global warming, what is happening? There is a loss of biodiversity. So this thing they were firstly recognizing United Nations Conference on the Human Environment 1972. Okay, held in Stockholm, Sweden, 1972 itself. It marked the emergence of international environmental law. This is responsible for the example UNFCCC. It's because it is being developed because of this particular agreement itself. The participants adopted the Stockholm Declaration and Action Plan for the Human Environment. That means what? For the first time we have realized that it's time that we should start controlling the greenhouse gases. Okay. A Stockholm Declaration was signed. Stockholm Declaration is also known as the Declaration on Human Environment. It sets out the principle for various international environmental issues, natural resource management, pollution prevention, and the relationship between the environment and development. And yahan se hi the concept of sustainable development is evolved. Okay. Principles: natural resources must be safeguarded, poverty alleviations for protecting the environment, weapons of mass destruction must be destroyed, non-renewable sources must be exhausted. These are the principles they thought of. At that time, we did not have any sort of binding agreements. Okay, they have just realized that it's time that we have to control the emissions of greenhouse gases. Okay, importance. So, Department of Environment was being created in 1980, and apart from that, Ministry of Environment Forest in 1985, and because of this only, what we have created, Environmental Protection Act 1986. Act 1986. Okay. And the Stockholm Conference paved the way for the creating United Nations Environmental Program. Okay. Next is what? Environmental, UN Environmental Program. Okay. So, United Nations Environmental Program was established on June 5, 1972 as a direct result of, we have discussed, the Stockholm Conference itself. Headquartered in Nairobi, Kenya, UN holds the distinction of being the first United Nations body based in Global South. It is based in what? Most of the things you will see that it is based in either US or Geneva itself. But this is what? The first international body that is situated in the Global South, Kenya itself. Primary decision-making body of United Nations Environmental Assembly, which enjoys universal membership from all 193 union members states and meets biennially to set the global environmental agenda. Now, this is United Nations Environmental Assembly 7, recently focused on the critical intersection of technology and nature, specifically addressing sustainable use of AI and the environmental monitoring and the management of critical minerals required for the green economy. So, this is important for this particular statement is very much important for you. This thing under environmental program, UN environmental program, what we have this particular assembly, and this is the first time we have realized. For example, this AI, artificial intelligence, it can be used for the development of what? Genetically modified organisms, genetically modified crops. Okay, for example, when we talk about the climate resilient crop, because at the same time we talk about the sustainability, we have what? For example, when you talk about this rice, you must be knowing that it requires how much? 5,000 liters of water for the development of 1 kg of rice. Hai is it? East Godavari district rice bowl, is it? How much it takes over there in East Godavari district? Yes. There, for example, if you go to the Haryana and the UP regions, because it will be taking around 5,200 liters. But if you go to the East Godavari district, there it will be taking around 4,400, something like that. Why? So because we have the rainfall काफी अच्छा होता है. It's close to the equator. Okay, na? Something 3,500 to 4,200, something like that. Okay, so we have climate resilient crops. Apart from that, Yesterday we are discussing about the biofuels. So there we have discussed what third and fourth generation of biofuels. Fourth generation of biofuels is what it will be used by using what genetically editing algae. It will be developed. So it will produce the biofuels, and apart from that, they will be what responsible for carbon sequestration also. So that means what? Now this time in this it is being recognized that we have to use artificial intelligence technologies so that what sustainable development, apart from that mitigating climate change also. समझ में आ रहा है? And ठीक है ना? So ये statement देख लीजिएगा आप लोग. Now what are the different reports of UNEP? Emission gap report annual analyzes the gap between the current greenhouse gases emissions and those needed to meet the Paris Agreement. For example, we have declared that we have to keep the temperature to around 1.5 degrees Celsius. But do you think we are on this particular phase? No. If the greenhouse gases this type of release karta, if it is not being controlled, very soon we will be crossing this 2 degree also. So it releases what? Emission gap report. Okay, how much emissions should be there and how much we are advanced. Adaptation gap report assess global progress and adaptation planning, financing, implementation, manage climate impacts, global environmental outlook, global waste management outlook, forest waste, food waste index report, frontiers, global biodiversity output. These are the different reports. Go through it. Okay. Now, agencies established and implemented by United Nations Environmental Program. Okay. So, World Meteorological Organization and United Nations Environmental established the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. This is being established with the help of these two organizations. United Nations Environment Program is one of the several implementing agencies of the Global Environmental Facility and Multilateral Fund for Implementing Montreal Protocol also. We will discuss what is GEF. Okay. Now, it hosts the secretaries of several multilateral environments agreement. For example, Convention on Biological Diversity, we have discussed. We have taken the classes of Convention on Biological Diversity, updated current affair. Minamata Convention on Mercury, that is also we have discussed. Convention on Migratory Species and Sites, we have discussed. The Solar Loan Program is sponsored by UNEP Help Finance Solar Power Project in India. So, now we'll start with what? The development of UNFCCC. Okay. So, this is being developed. That summit is called what? Earth Summit, Rio de Janeiro, 1992. The United Nations Conference on the Environment and Development, popularly known as Earth Summit. Okay. UNCED succeeded in raising public awareness to the need of integrated environment and the development. So here we have started what? Thinking of certain binding agreements that has to be developed for the purpose of controlling what? Greenhouse gases emissions. At UNCED, 190 countries placed their commitment to achieving by 2010 a significant reduction in the current rate of biodiversity loss at global, regional and local level. So this particular summit, it leads to the generation of what? Agenda 21, Rio Declaration, Forest Principle, Convention on Biological Diversity, UNFCCC, and this is what? United Nations Convention to what? Combat desertification. That means what? When we talk about like Thar desert, it is also what? Spreading. It's also spread. Now we have to control it. We have to what? Control it. Otherwise, what will happen? We'll be suffering from food insecurity. So, a major achievement of the Earth Summit was an agreement on climate change convention, which what we developed Kyoto Protocol, and finally what we have developed Paris Agreement. And now we are taking all the conference of parties that happened after Paris Agreement, that is talking about what? The different initiative that has to be taken for the purpose of bringing the temperature in within 1.5 degrees Celsius. Important legally binding agreement open for signature under the aegis United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Okay, so you understood UNFCCC, it is being generated in what? Earth Summit itself. Okay. For example, we are going to discuss COP30. So COP30 is what? It's a conference of party 30 belonging to United Nations Framework of Climate Change and conference. We have what? United Nations Convention to combat desertification and Convention on Biological Diversity. And apart from that, here you can see global environmental facilities, it's also being generated. Global environmental facility. Okay. Are you aware of it? What is GEF? A bit. It's a financial institution responsible for what? Giving finances for the purpose of what? Sustainable development. Is it okay? So we'll exactly see what it is. The Global Environment Facility is established in 1992 Earth Summit itself. So along with that, another institution is being created that is called Global Environmental Facility. Is a key multilateral finance mechanism providing grants and concessional funding for projects addressing biodiversity losses, climate change, land degradation and pollution. Land degradation, for example, when we talk about United Nations Convention to combat desertification, that means what? We have to restore the degraded land. So for that particular purpose, if we require funds, so obviously with that fund, it will be monitored under GEF. Okay. It serves 186 plus countries with the World Bank acting as a trustee and 18 implementing agencies, financial mechanism for convention. The GEF serves 5 main conventions. 5 main conventions of what? United Nations Framework Climate Change Conference, Convention on Biological Diversity, Land Degradation to Combat Desertifications, POP. We have discussed Stockholm Conventions, Persistent Organic Pollutants, and Minamata Conventions. So these are what the GEF, Global Environmental Facility, it's what responsible for the purpose of what? Ensuring finances. Focus area is what we have discussed: biodiversity, climate change, international water, land degradation, chemicals and waste. Why this chemicals and waste? Because of Stockholm Conventions and sustainable forest management. Recent development focused on, we have discussed when we are discussing about, for example, we have discussed about the Convention on Biological Diversity. We have discussed, we have updated with the current affair. So there, focus on implementing Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. GEF continues to allocate a significant funding, 700 plus million to 14 sessions for the nature positive projects, including India. Key funds beside the main trust fund, it manages the least developed countries fund and a special climate change fund also. Is it? We have discussed, if you can recall, this Convention on Biological Diversity, we have discussed in detail formation, and apart from that, listen, latest update also. Okay. Now, this is what? United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification. It is also what? It's an agreement. Okay. Legally binding international agreement that is being developed on the what? 1992 Rio Earth Summit, and it is responsible for the purpose of what? Restoration of degraded land. So there is a target. Sustainable land development to sustainable land management, focusing on arid, semi-arid and dry subhumid areas aimed at achieving land degradation neutrality by 2030. Just remember this term, land degradation neutrality by 2030. This is our target. So this particular target you notice in Conference of Party 29, also Conference of Party 30 also, that this is our target. Land degradation neutrality. That means what? For example, when you talk about this deforestation, apart from that, desert, it is spreading. So we have to combat, we have to control it. That is called your land degradation neutrality. Neutrality means what? Neutrality means what? How much land it is been degraded and how much it is restored. That will be what? Same. Key concept uses a bottom-up approach, emphasizing local community participation and participations. Indigenous local community, they will participate for the purpose of restoration of degraded land. India's role, India hosted Conference of Party 14 2019 and is committed to restoring 26 million hectares of degraded land by 2030, updated to 45.3 million hectares. This is India's responsibility. And the same, this is what India also talks about, what? Achieving land degradation neutrality by 2030 itself. Now latest one. So the 16th Conference of Parties to the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification took place in what? Took place in 2024. Was held in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. Okay. Focus area: global drought framework, advanced effort on a global drought framework with finalization expected in Conference of Party 17, Mongolia itself. Financial pledges over 20 billion USD was placed for land restoration, drought resilience and desertification. See, whenever you talk about this to combat desertification on all, what we have to restore the degraded land. Second is what we have to increase also what? Forest cover also. Okay, and that will be done with the help of the indigenous local people participation. Land restoration initiative focused on accelerating the 2080-2030 strategic framework to combat land degradation. Okay, land degradation utility by 2030 itself. Now, India's role and commitment at Conference of Parties 16. First is what? Aravali Green Wall project. All this there in your paper itself. You must be knowing about the Aravali problem. Presented a model initiative to combat desertification aiming to revive over 1.1 million hectares of degraded land across Haryana, Rajasthan, Gujarat and Delhi. Plant for mother campaign एक पेड़ माँ के नाम, ठीक है ना? Highlighted as a major community driven initiative, over 1 billion saplings planted in 2040. See, so such type of question it can be this एक पेड़ माँ के नाम is initiative in accordance with the Conference of Parties 16 of UNCCCT. That will be, we have heard this statement, but we failed to correlate. Okay. National Biodiversity Strategy and Action Plan. India introduced an updated plans with 23 targets, strengthening the commitment of restoring lands and fostering drought resilience. Financial commitment. India reiterated its dedication of allocating a significant resources, including a proposed 81,664 crore on biodiversity and conservation efforts by 2025 to 2030. Global leadership. See, you have to remember this 2030. Why? What is the reason? The reason is what? Land degradation neutrality by 2030. So this is how we have to correlate. Ultimately, this is our target, na? Okay. Now we are talking about UNFCCC. So what we have discussed, this particular UNFCCC, it is being created in 1992 Earth Summit itself. Along with that, two other binding agreement it was being created for Convention on Biological Diversity, and apart from that, United Nations Convention to combat desertification. Along with that, there is another financial institution that was being created, GEF. Is it okay? अभी तो clear है सबको? ठीक है. तो revise कर लीजिए what we have done. So from here the actual story will start, but remember one thing, lots of things are there. Okay, na? See, lots of things are there, but remember one thing, UPSC will ask from Conference of Party 29, Conference of Party 30, and how they are related with India's achievement, India's participation, India national determined contributions, INDC, and Paris Agreement. We'll start. These are the four things where we have to focus. Unnecessarily, if you start focusing on the rest, different Conference of Party from 1 to 28, do you think you'll get anything? Okay, na? So here we have to focus on what? Here we have to focus on Paris Agreement, its different articles, okay, 6.2, 6.4, 19, 13, 14. These are the different articles that have been added. Conference of Party 29, Conference of Party 30. Okay, write it down somewhere. This is what we have to focus. If you unnecessarily read like the other things, you won't achieve anything. And see, just let me know see, just do one thing after 4 or 5 days. Okay, just text me a message regarding this, the development of 100 questions. Okay, na? 100 questions. I will be developing 10 to 15 questions from this Conference of Party 29 and Conference of Party 30 itself. Going through the topic is different, but practicing the questions makes a lot of difference itself. Okay. So first is what? UNFCCC, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, is an international environmental treaty that came into existence under the aegis of United Nations. It was negotiated in what? 1992 Earth Summit. And if you talk about like up to 2026, we have how much members? 198 parties are there. Objective is what? It stabilizes greenhouse gases concentration in the atmospheric level that would prevent dangerous consequences. Because if you we must be aware of what? Paris Agreement, Paris Summit, Paris Climate Summit itself. It's belong to UNFCCC. And what is the target? We have to limit the temperature below 1.5 degrees Celsius. That means what? We are talking about the greenhouse gases emissions. If it is being controlled, that means what? We will be controlling global warming itself. Okay? Legal effect, it is considered legally non-binding. This is important. It is considered legally non-binding. Okay, that means what? India, when you talk about India, it will give certain INDC. It's that we will be taking certain initiative for the purpose of controlling this much. We will discuss, but we do not have any sort of commitment. Okay. It provides a framework for negotiating a specific international treaties called protocol. For example, Kyoto Protocol. Is it that aims to set binding limits on greenhouse gases? When you talk about the UNFCCC, it is what? Legally non-binding, but the protocol that is being developed, that will be what? Binding. That will be what? Binding in nature. UNFCCC has set itself no binding limits. Are you getting my point? UNFCCC की बात करेंगे तो UNFCCC का ऐसे देखा जाए इट्स ए व्हाट? नॉन बाइंडिंग. लेकिन जो यूएनएफसीसी के थ्रू जो प्रोटोकॉल्स क्रिएट होंगे, फॉर एग्जांपल क्योटो प्रोटोकॉल्स, उसमें जो टारगेट्स होंगे दैट विल बी व्हाट? बाइंडिंग इन नेचर. इज इट? Now what is conference of parties? Conference of parties is the decision making body of UNFCCC. Okay, decision making body of UNFCCC. All states that are parties to the convention are represented. For example, how much we have? We have how much? 198 parties are there. Okay. To review the implementation of any legal instrument that the COP adopts, they promote the effective implementation of the convention itself. So when you talk about the conference of party, they are the highest decision making body of the conference of party itself. Okay. Now when you talk about the conference of party, we have what? 3 conference of party under UNFCCC. First is your what? Normally conference of party. So this particular conference of party, it talks about what? UNFCCC. For example, the meetings that is being held under UNFCCC, they will be represented at UNFCCC 1, UNFCCC 2, UNFCCC 3, and presently what we have? UNFCCC 30 itself. Okay, it talks about what? UNFCCC meetings. And so Treaty 1992 United Nations Framework on Climate Change role the parent body. It oversees the general global climate conference cooperation itself. From this COP, what we have? Kyoto Protocol. We have what? Kyoto Protocol. So this CMP, Conference of Parties, serving as the meeting of the parties to the Kyoto Protocol. That means what? Already we have Conference of Party, and that is related to what? UNFCCC. But under UNFCCC, what we have? Kyoto Protocol. So from that Kyoto Protocol, another COP will start. That will be counting COP 1, 2, 3, 4 after Kyoto Protocol itself. That is called your CMP. Conference of Parties serving at the meeting of Kyoto Protocol, and you must be knowing that this Kyoto Protocol, it's a failure approach because United States never ratified it and Canada withdrew it, and because of that we have shifted towards Paris Agreement, and because of that now under UNFCCC COP we have a Paris climate change, and from that Paris climate change another COP will start, and that is called your CMA, Conference of Parties serving as the meeting of parties to the Paris Agreement. So from Paris Agreement COP 1, COP 2. So CMP, CMA 1, CMA 2, and here it will be CMP 1. समझ में आ गया ना. कॉन्फ्रेंस ऑफ पार्टी इज रिलेटेड टू यूएनएफसीसी. CMP, it is related to Kyoto Protocol itself, and we have what? CMA, it is related to your Paris Agreement. Okay, so these are the different conference of parties. Okay, so Kyoto Protocol Foundations 1995. So here you can see that we have conference of party 1. That means what? The first conference of party after 1992. It will be represented at conference of party 1. We have Berlin Mandate, Kyoto Protocols. Conference of party 3 is what? Kyoto Protocol. And from here what will have start? CMP will start. Okay. After that, this is called a Kyoto Protocol Foundation. We will discuss each and everything. And finally, you can see that we have what? The transition and Copenhagen crisis from 2015 to 2014 itself. This is before your, prior to Paris Agreement. Okay. Okay, these are your Bali roadmap, Copenhagen, Cancun, Durban platform, Warsaw mechanism. And finally, what we have? The Paris Agreement era. Paris Agreement era is what? 2015 to present, because what we have discussed in the beginning of the classes, Paris Agreement is what? It's a living agreement. It grows along with the demands. If greenhouse gases the more, we have to control it. So we have Paris Agreement, Marquis Agreement, Bonn, Katowice rule book, and finally we have what? Conference of Party 30 itself, Belém mission. So we have to focus on these two mission, these two important mission itself. So here you can see this is your what? Kyoto Protocol. Okay, we have discussed about the protocol. Protocol means what? It will have binding agreements. Is it okay? So this is called your Conference of Party 3 under UNFCCC. So Kyoto Protocol is adopted in Kyoto, Japan in 1997. It came into force in 2005. It is the only global treaty with binding limits on greenhouse gases emission. It set the binding limit, and because of that, you can see that USA never ratified it, and Canada withdraw it from here. There are currently 192 parties to the Kyoto Protocol. India ratified in 2002. USA never ratified. Canada withdrew it in 2002. It has what? Binding limits on greenhouse gases emissions. Now, fight global warming by reducing greenhouse gases emission concentration in the atmosphere to a level that will prevent dangerous anthropogenic interference with the climate system. That means what? We have to control, we have to regulate the greenhouse gases emissions so that it won't be responsible for global warming. It is based on the principle of common but differentiated responsibility. That means what? When you talk about pollution, when you talk about the global warming, it's a common problem, and everybody is responsible for it, because everyone is what? Slowly and gradually they are becoming industrialized in nature, and because of the industrialization, because of the vehicular emissions, it emits carbon dioxide in the ecosystem, in the environment itself. So everybody is responsible for it, but differentiated responsibility. But majorly you can see that the highly developed countries, they are responsible for it. So it's, are you getting my point? So basically it has divided the country into two types. One is the developed nations, another is what? Underdeveloped or developing nation itself. Now when you talk about this global warming, emissions of greenhouse gases, they are common. That means for each and every nation, they are responsible for it. But you can see maximum greenhouse gases emissions were being emitted from this industrialized nation. They are industrialized, they are developed in nature. But when you talk about the underdeveloping countries, the developing countries, they are not developed. They are in the phase of developing, and because of them, it's become very much difficult for them to what? Go for the technology transfer, to go for what? Developing a certain technology that will be responsible for what? Sequestration of carbon dioxide. और उनकी इकोनॉमी भी क्या होगी? If they start controlling it, the economy will stop. Industrialize नहीं हो पाएगा, and because of that, here you can see कि now it has set the binding limits for developed nation itself. The binding limit, that means what? They have to limit the emissions of greenhouse gases emissions. The binding is set for developed nation, and obviously when you talk about the underdeveloping countries, when you talk about the developing nation itself, they should also be controlling the emissions of greenhouse gases emissions. But it will be what? Voluntary in nature. That means what? No binding targets. इसको कहा जाता है common but differentiated responsibility. Common, that means what? Each and everyone, they have to control the emissions of greenhouse gases emissions. But differentiated means what? It's the developed countries who have contributed more towards the greenhouse gases emissions, so the binding limit is set for developed countries. ठीक है ना? And because of this, you can see that USA never ratified it. So what is the target over here? The Kyoto Protocol legally binds developed countries parties to the emission reductions target. The protocol first commitment period started in 2008 and ended in 2012. The second commitment period began in 1st January 2013 and in 2020, but it never came into being. Okay. So now what are the different greenhouse gases that has been covered under protocol? We have discussed that 60% of the greenhouse gases emission is because of your carbon dioxide, and approximately 16 to 18% of the global warming is because of methane. ठीक है ना? So we have carbon dioxide, we have methane, we have this, we have perfluorocarbons, we have HFCs, and we have what? Sulfur hexafluoride also. We have discussed about the common but differentiating responsibility. Nothing is binding on them, but every initiative is what? Voluntary nature. That means what we are talking about the developing nations. They have to also control the emissions of greenhouse gases emissions. But under differentiated responsibility, उनके ऊपर कोई binding targets नहीं है. The countries you can see under CBDR, developed countries like USA, UK, and Russia must contribute more to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by accepting certain binding limits on greenhouse gases emissions. Okay. Now, for example, now when you talk about the Kyoto Protocol, it has set the binding limits. Binding limits on what? Developed countries. And when you talk about the underdeveloped countries, also developing countries also, they have to voluntarily control the emissions of greenhouse gases emissions. Since binding targets are there, so the concept of carbon trading, it evolved from this particular Kyoto Protocol. For example, suppose consider it that they have to control the greenhouse gases emissions. The base level is how much? 1990 itself. They have to control up to 5% from 1990 level itself. When you talk about like USA, it has given certain binding target. That means what the carbon emissions, carbon dioxide, because at that time you can see that it was carbon dioxide that was responsible for conducting more than 68 to 70% of the global warming itself. So obviously the carbon emissions, it is being set for the USA. Okay. Now suppose when you talk about like African nations, they are the what? Developing nation itself. So obviously they are on the phase of development. So if they are on the phase of development, obviously they will be developing coal power plants, they will be developing steel industries and all those things. For example, USA ka target is suppose 2000 or 2050, 2000 something, that 2000 carbon target is there. And abhi aapka Africa, it is going to develop a particular industry itself. Okay, but suppose USA, there is a high possibility that it can exceed the target. It can what? Exceed the target. But Africa, it is very low in the target. So what it will do? It will invest the money in this African nation itself, so that what? The industries that is being developed, it won't emit so much of carbon dioxide. It won't emit so much of carbon dioxide. ठीक है ना? And this, he will be getting what? Carbon credit. He will be getting what? One carbon credit is equivalent to 1 tons of carbon dioxide emitted. So suppose its limit was 200 something like that. 200 consider it, but it exceeded. Suppose it has to exceed 230, 240 something like that. And what? It is exceeding 14. So obviously what that? He will earn it from investing in some underdeveloping itself, underdeveloping nation itself. तो उसका कितना हो जाएगा? He will be within the limit itself. So from here what? The concept of carbon trading initiated. So for the purpose of carbon trading or carbon emission trading, here you can see he has divided the country into what? Annex 1 parties, included industrialized nations, economy in transition, committed to binding targets reducing greenhouse gases emissions. Obviously we have to develop, if it is industrialized in nature, they have the binding target, they have to reduce the greenhouse gases from base level 1990 itself. Annex 2 parties, a subset of Annex 1, only the wealthy OECD members excludes economy in transition, must provide financial resources and technology transfer to help developing nations. ठीक है ना? Annex B parties, Annex 1 countries that accepted binding targets specifically for Kyoto commitment periods, legally bounded to quantified emissions limitations and reductions objectives. Annexure B party, they have what? Limitations. That means what? They are allowed to emit only this much tons of carbon dioxide. So obviously if it is exceeding, what they will do? They have to earn carbon emissions credit, and they will be, how they will be earning? By investing the amount in your underdeveloped countries itself. For example, coal power plants are being developed. So they will be invested for that, they will be investing it for the development. No, you do not invest in this particular solar plant, you invest in renewable energy, solar energy, wind power. They will say, no, we will not have the funds. Okay, we are providing you the funds, you provide us with what? Carbon emissions credit. Non-annexure parties, mostly developing countries including India, China, Brazil, no binding targets, encourage reduced emissions via clean development mechanism. In clean development mechanism, the developed countries, they will be what? Transferring technology transfer, so that what we can move towards cleaner technology. LDC, least developed countries 47, particularly vulnerable countries with every low income, given a special status, they receive prioritized funding from adaptations. Okay. Okay. Now this concept, they are totally be changed under Conference of Party 29 and Conference of Party 30 itself. That seems to be very much irrelevant in nature. Okay, but let us see. Flexible market mechanism under Kyoto Protocol. Flexible market means what? The developed countries, they can invest in underdeveloped countries for the purpose of what? Technology transfer, for the purpose of development of those industries that will be what? Controlling the carbon emissions, and because of that they will be getting what? Carbon credit itself. They will be getting what? Carbon credit itself. Okay? Now, clean development mechanism. For example, we have annexure B parties, that is what? Developed nation, and non-annexed party, developing nations. What they will be getting? Certified emissions reduction. Who will be getting certified emissions reductions? Annexure B party itself. A developed countries funds a green project. In that, the green project means what? Related to renewable energy. Like in India earns credit, because we have seen that when you talk about the developed countries, they have what? Limitations of carbon dioxide emission itself. Under Kyoto Protocol, they are binding in nature, and because of that, what? They have to go for the financial mechanism. They have to go for what? Carbon credit trading itself. We have joint implementation. Annexure B and Annexure B, develop to develop emissions reduction unit. One developed countries invest in another developed countries, often in economic transition like Russia. International emission trading, Annexure B parties, assigned amount unit, cap and trade. Countries that emit less than their allowed limit sell their spare capacity to other. For example, when talking to two developed countries itself, okay, one country, for example USA, it is a highly developed in nature. ठीक है ना, उसके पास क्या, there is a certain limitations, but it will exceed those limitations. But when you talk about the Russia, now it has moved to the totally what? Renewable sources of energy. Totally what? It's a moving toward the development of nuclear energy itself. So obviously, what certain limits it will be left. So he will be selling it to America itself. Okay. We have discussed about this carbon trading. Now, what is if they do not follow it? If a country does not meet the requirement of the measurement and reporting, the country loses the privilege of gaining credit through joint implementation program. Okay. Suppose if we're talking about the developed Annexure B and Annexure B party itself. So obviously they have what? They have the limitations on the Kyoto Protocol. If they fail to follow it, what will happen? They won't be getting any sort of credit under joint implementation. Joint implementation is what? One developed country it is going to fund and go for the technology transfer in other developed country itself. We won't be getting it. Second is what? The countries also be banned from participating in the cap and trade program. Cap and trade program. For example, Russia. Russia is what? Moving toward the renewable energy, is focusing on the geothermal energy, is focusing toward the nuclear energy itself. So obviously, what the carbon dioxide emission is very much less in nature. So he will be participating in cap and trade program itself. Okay, so this thing is not very much important. Okay, so we have the different initiatives. This post Kyoto Protocol, that means after Kyoto Protocol, towards what? Paris Agreement. So that is what here you can see. Conference of Party 13 and CMP what? 3. CMP 3 means what? After Kyoto Protocol 3 conference. So here you can see this is your what? Bali, Indonesia adopted a Conference of Party 13 in 2007. Bali Roadmap was a pivotal framework designed to finalize 2012 Global Climate Agreement by 2009 itself. It recognized that the evidence of global warming is unequivocal and required urgent action. So Bali Action Plan, it focuses on shared vision and long-term global goal for emissions reductions. Now presently till Paris Agreement, we are more or less focusing towards what? Global emission itself. Mitigations, quantified target for the developed nations and nationally appropriate actions for developing ones. We are still talking about what? Developing countries, they have what? Binding targets. Adaptations, enhancing international cooperation to support vulnerable countries itself. Adaptations means what? For adaptation, there is 2 terms, adaptations and mitigations. Adaptation means what? For example, if we have to adapt to the climate change, that means what? With the help of technology transfer, it can be done. Technology accelerating the transfer of clean energy tech. Finance providing financial resources for the climate action. It has launched the adaptation fund and initiated what? Reducing emissions from deforestation. This is go through it, Kyoto protocols. Okay, go through it. Mexico, go through it. Denmark, Doha. We have Doha, Qatar, Conference of Party 8 and CMP 8. Conference of Party 18 reached an agreement to extend the life of Kyoto Protocol. Extend the life of Kyoto Protocol, which has been due to expire in 2012 itself and until 2020 second commitment period. The extension of the Kyoto Protocol until 2020 limited in a scope to only 15% of the global carbon emissions. This was due to the lack of participation of Canada, Japan, Russia, Belarus, Ukraine, New Zealand, and apart from that, USA, it has never ratified it, and Canada, it what? Withdrew. So that means for the major countries, the major developed countries, they are not the part of Kyoto Protocol itself. They refuse to join it. And also the developing countries like China, India, Brazil are not subjected to the emission reduction like Kyoto Protocol, and because of this, now Kyoto Protocol it has failed. It is a what? Failed mission. Because a major chunk of the countries, USA, Canada, apart from these countries, economic transition, they are not the part of it. When you talk about the China, India, they are considering as what? Developing countries itself. So we have discussed in the Kyoto Protocol that developing countries, they do not have binding targets. Voluntarily, they can participate for the what? For the purpose of controlling the greenhouse gas emissions. Okay. Now we have what? This Warsaw, Poland. The term intended nationally determined contributions was coined in Warsaw. Intended nationally determined contribution means what? Each country, for example, developing countries, we have discussed developing countries, they are responsible for what? Voluntary. They will, with certain initiative, they will be responsible for what? Controlling the carbon dioxide emissions. Okay, voluntary है ना, and that particular nation उसके वो किसके अंदर में आएगा? It will be under intended nationally determined contribution. Further, the Warsaw mechanism was proposed, which would provide expertise, possibly aid to developing nations to cope with the loss and damage from such natural extremities as heat waves, droughts, floods, threats such as rising sea level and desertification. RED Plus was initiated in what? Conference of Party, this thing. Okay, now from here the things are very much important. Paris Climate Summit. ठीक है ना? Paris Climate Summit. So Paris Climate Summit, officially known as 21st Conference of the Parties to the UNFCCC. took place in Paris. So this you have to remember it. Okay, this is very much important. Presently what? Presently, just now we have concluded Conference of Party 30. This Paris summit is what? Conference of Party 21. The summit resulted in the adoption of Paris Agreement that talks about what? We have to, with certain initiatives, we have to control the rise in temperature within what? 1.5 degrees Celsius itself. To master the Paris Agreement, we need to look it as is what? Living agreement we have discussed. It is not just a 2015 treaty. It has evolved through every COP. For every COP, under every COP, what we are trying to control the temperature in accordance with the Paris Agreement, and because of that, we have different initiatives are being added under Conference of Party 21 Paris Agreement, and because of this is called your Living Agreement into a complex machine of finance, carbon trading, and transparency rules. The bottom of architecture, NDC, nationally determined contributions and ratchet mechanism. What is it? Unlike Kyoto Protocol, which told the countries how much to cut, that is what? Binding in nature. Paris climate countries decide themselves via nationally determined contributions. So what we have seen under Kyoto Protocol, developed countries they have set the target that they have to reduce their greenhouse gases emissions. Considering 1990 as a base level, they have to reduce it by 5%. They have to do it. When you talk about the developing countries, they do not have the target. They have to voluntarily take the target for the purpose of controlling the emissions. Now, voluntary, what they will take, it will be under your NDC, nationally determined contributions. Okay, na? Okay. Now, 5-year cycle, every 5-year countries must submit a new NDC. That means what? This NDC, what they have submitted, it's for applicable for how much? For 5 years. And after every 5 years, they have to submit another NDC. What are the different initiatives proposed by the government so that what we can limit the temperature up to 1.5 degrees Celsius. But it's a ratchet mechanism. Every year, the target it will increase. Non-backsliding principle. Each new NDC must be more ambitious than the previous one. समझ में आ रहा है आपको? It will be what? More ambitious. The target must be more. ऐसा नहीं कि first time we have taken the more target 100%, next time no, it's not possible 60, next time yes it is feasible 80. It's not like that. We have to always what? Go on the improvement, and that is why it's called ratchet mechanism. Binding versus non-binding. The process submitting and reporting is legally binding. We'll discuss this thing. Every year, each country, they are responsible for the purpose of submitting their targets under their NDC. Okay, but whether the targets are fulfilled or not, that is non-binding in nature. For example, punitive agreements, it cannot be certain type of actions, it cannot be taken against them if the target is not fulfilled. Yes, they have to submit what is the target, but whether the target is achieved or not, it is not legally enforceable under any international law. Okay, so now here we have to see the different market and financial mechanisms. The different mechanisms under Paris Climate Summit. First is what? 6.2 allows direct transfer of internationally transferred mitigations outcome. It is decentralized country to country market. India carbon market. India has finalized a list of 13 sectors like green hydrogen for ITMO trading. First deal with Japan are active in this thing. So here ITMO, that means what? Under this Paris climate change, when you talk about the article 6.2, it talks about the carbon trading between the two nations. Between what? Two nations. For example, when you talk about India, this has a 13 sector. That means what? When you talk about the economy in transitions, when you talk about the different countries, they can go for what? Bilateral carbon trading. For example, Japan, it has decided to invest in your green trading itself. So this is your bilateral trading between the two countries. So when you talk about the 6.2, it talks about what? Bilateral trading, carbon. Please write it down. Bilateral carbon, bilateral trading that is happening between the two countries itself. ठीक है. 6.2 is what? Carbon trading that is happening in between the two countries. ठीक है. Okay. Next is what? 6.4. 6.4 replaces clean development mechanism. A centralized UN body supervises credit issuance, features a 5% levy on the adaptation fund and 2% overall mitigations, cancellations, transitioning CDM, all credit. For example, earlier 6.4, this is what? Carbon trading that is taking place between the two countries under the supervision of United Nations specialized agencies. Are you getting my point? For example, this is what? Country to country bilateral trading. We have decided, for example, India and Japan, they have decided, India said that we are going to develop this green, we are focusing on the green hydrogen itself, we do not have the sort of technology. Japan said, no, not in, we are going to give you this particular funds, and apart from that, technology transfer also. And Japan in return, what he will be getting? Credit, carbon credit itself. So this is what bilateral trading. But here what? It's your, for example, this is another country, this is country one. Country one. So this country one, it has started to what? Fund green project. Fund green project. Green project means what? Green project means what? Renewable energy project. Okay. So this country one, he can fund this green project in country 2 itself. Okay. In the country 2, he can invest it in the private sector project also. In the private sector project also. Private sector project also. That means, okay, private sector. But this transfer mechanism, it will be under the supervision of United Nations. Okay. For example, this was your earlier one was what? Carbon trading between the two nations is bilateral in nature, but this is also happening is bilateral in nature, but it is under the supervision of what? United Nations agencies. ठीक है ना? And here what? They are the two countries, they will participate, but here what? It is not necessary. Country to country participation, but along with that, a particular country he can invest in green project taken by certain private, for example, Adani. He has lot of solar based projects. ठीक है ना? So now this particular from this funding features a 5% levy on the adaptation fund. Whatever the funding, 5% will go to the adaptation fund. Adaptation fund means what? For example, we have lot of developing countries. So there we have to go for the climate resilience agriculture. We have to go for what? Developing certain technologies. So that will be given from the adaptation fund itself. 2% on overall mitigation cancellations. So this is this particular, when you talk about the 6.4, it talks about what? Earlier we have this CDM mechanism under Kyoto Protocol. Now under 6.4, it is called your sustainable development mechanism. Sustainable. That means government agencies, countries, it is investing in private sector for the development of green project. And apart from that, when the transactions is been done, 5% will go to the adaptation fund itself. That means what? We are talking about the sustainable development mechanism. So from clean development mechanism, we have moved towards sustainable development. Mechanism. Okay. And here what? Country to private agencies, private companies, for example, Adani, towards the development of solar project, and definitely these transactions, it will be under what? Supervision of United Nations. ठीक है? Just a moment. Is it okay, Sasi? Clear है? अंतर है ना 6.2. That means what? Country to country bilateral in nature. They want, it is not under the, it is better what to call, it is decentralized in nature. 6.2 is what? Decentralized carbon trading mechanism. But it is what? Centralized. Why centralized? Because it is under the supervision of, so this is what? Decentralized carbon trading. हाँ हो सकता है, यस। लेकिन यहाँ पे क्या होगा, country to country, for example article 6.2 it will be talking about the Japan is financing green project in of India. This will be under 6.2 decentralized nature, central authority will won't come into picture. But another it will be what, Japan it will be financing Adani solar project under the superposition. समझ में आ गया? Just a moment. See, this was the question that is asked in 2015 itself, 2025 itself regarding Article 6. See, whenever the questions that will be coming from the factual side itself, you should know the essence of the topic. You should know they won't be entering into the more detailed technical specifications. Just listen to the question carefully. Consider the following statement. For example, statement 1. Article 6 of the Paris Agreement. We have discussed about Article 6 itself, 6.2 and 6.4. It is talking about the what? Carbon trading mechanism. It is talking about what? Development of green energies. It is talking about what? Sustainable development mechanism. The developed nations, they can what? Earn credit by investing in the other developing countries itself, either through 6.2 bilateral trading itself, country to country trading, or it will be undertaken by 6.4 itself under the supervision of, that means what, both decentralized and centralized structure is available. So what is the question? Article 6 of the Paris Agreement on climate change is frequently discussed in global discussions on sustainable development and climate change. This is the first statement. Is it true? First statement. In global discussion on sustainable development and climate change. Sustainable development है, climate change. Article 2, Article 6 of the Paris Agreement of climate change sets out the principle for carbon market. These are all these are what carbon trading itself. Article 3, Article 6 of the Paris Agreement on Climate Change intends to promote inter-country means what? Two different countries, non-market strategies to reach their climate target itself. This statement is also what? True itself. Okay, so देखिए क्वेश्चन कितना सिंपल था. They have not specifically asked about 6.2 and 6.4 because article है ना. So obviously you must be knowing that when you talk about the 6.2 and 6.4, they are what? The carbon trading mechanism. ठीक है ना? To achieve what? Basically they are being mean to achieve what? For example, if I say कि this article 6.2, it can be utilized for the purpose of fulfilling the binding targets under NDC of India. Listen to the questions carefully. Article 6.4, a decentralized carbon trading mechanisms can be utilized for fulfilling the binding targets under nationally determined contributions of India, which comes into picture for the purpose of fulfilling 1.5 degrees Celsius temperature limit. A statement is true. Why not? उससे कोई मतलब नहीं निकलता ना, उससे कोई मतलब नहीं निकलता. The thing is what? Nationally determined contributions. This is non-binding in nature. This is non-binding in nature. Non-binding in nature मतलब then why will go for it? समझ में आ गया? ठीक है. So for science and tech and this environment, you have to practice a lot of questions. Otherwise, कुछ जी पढ़ लीजिए. The things normally the questions they are easy in nature. जैसा हम लोग जो लेवल whatever the level, for example science and tech जो लेवल हम प्रैक्टिस कर चुके हैं ना, उससे कम ही आएगा. Now we have what? Article 9 also. Next, the new collective quantified goal. Okay, this is the new finance goal of that is mentioned in Article 9. The new collective quantified goal replaced the older 100 billion targets. New target is what? 300 billion year by 2035 from the developed countries. Now when you talk about this Article 9, first two Article 6.2 and 6.4, they are talking the sustainable development, they are talking about the carbon trading mechanisms itself. But when you talk about Article 9, it is talking about the finance that is essential. Kitna finance? Earlier what we have developed, how much we are thinking of 100 billion, but now how much we require? 3 billion target. So this is your new collective quantified goal. Financial gap, UPSC may ask about $1 trillion need, while $3,000 billion is the public goal. The actual requirement for the global south is how much? And for global south, if you talk about like the actual adaptation fund or green fund that is being required is how much? 1.3 trillion. But presently, how much we are targeting? So Article 9 talks about this new collective quantified goal. Directly अगर आता है क्वेश्चन तो ठीक है ना. We have discussed, for example, sustainable development. Article 6.4, market-based mechanism creates a centralized governance system for public and the private sector to trade emission reduction anywhere in the world is due to replace the clean development mechanism. What we have discussed there into the notes so that what you can revise it. Non-market-based mechanism. Article 6.8 develops a framework for cooperation between the countries to reduce emission outside the market mechanism. Outside the market mechanism, such as developmental aid where no trade is involved. This cooperation mechanism, if properly designed, should make it easier to achieve reduction target and raise ambitions. This system are more transparent mechanism. So this is your non-market based mechanisms. And voluntarily the country can target. Okay. Now we have different articles. Resilience, governance and accountability, articles 7, 8 and 13. Okay, this articles, write it down from this 7, 8 and 13 this time. This. We'll take a gap of 5 minutes. Just revise the things because lots of factual things are there. Take a gap of 5 minutes. Again, we'll start. Don't worry, just revise my notes. Along with that, I will be giving you 100 questions. Practice those questions. Okay. And for environment, remember one thing. Along with the notes, it is very much important to practice the questions paper. Okay, na? Environment. याद रखिएगा, otherwise it will be very much difficult to solve into the paper. You must have completed each and everything from the magazines, whatever you are going, but when it comes to the paper, without practicing, it will become very much difficult to solve the questions. Okay? Because when you talk about the environment, it is a what holistic subject. Holistic subject means what? In per statement, each and everything it will be involved. So for that particular purpose, you have to practice a lot of questions itself. So take a break of 5 minutes. Okay. Okay. So now, since we have discussed that when you talk about the climate agreement, they are what? It's a living agreement itself, because if every time we can see that when you talk about the articles like 6.2, 6.4 and these articles 9, they were not initially in the beginning, they will be added to the different conference of party itself. Is it okay? So when you talk about like articles 7, 8 and 13, this 13 is very much important, we'll discuss in detail. So article 13, global action on adaptation. Adaptation means what? At focus on increasing adaptive capacity and resilience. At conference of party 30, 59 specific indicators are finalized across 7 thematic areas. For example, the 7 thematic areas are water, food, health, ecosystem, infrastructure, poverty and culture. So this is under what? Conference of party 30. This is very much important. So write it down. This is very much important. Okay, now what are the different themes under which we have to go for the adaptation program? Adaptation means what? For example, food. In the coming future, because of the climate change, there is a high chances that we will be suffering from food insecurity. So what are the adaptability we have? For example, we have discussed about the genetically modified crops, genetically edited crops. Maybe in the coming future, we can adopt for genetically edited crops, but that seems to be what? That because that is not going to destroy your gene edited pools. That is that is not going to destroy your indigenous gene pool. ठीक है ना? Okay. So remember this. Loss and damage fund designed for permanent losses, economic and non-economic, that cannot be avoided. Fund is now hosted by the World Bank as a dedicated secretariat. 2026 marked the first year of actual fund disbursement to the climate vulnerable nation. It includes slow onset of event, sea level rise. Now this is very much important. Write it down. Important. Article 13. This is important. Biennial transparency report. Write it down in your means like BTR reports. Article. Write it down. This important topic. Write it down. Article 13. It generates biennial transparency report. Biennial transparency report, and from this reports, what we develop? Global stock stake. Global stock stake. And global stock stake. Okay. And from this we will come to know whether the different indices 1.5 degrees Celsius. Okay, just write it down. Article 13, BTR, global stock stake. I will explain each and everything, just write it down. The questions, it will be of integrated nature. ठीक है ना? ओके. एंडिसिस. हाँ, एंडिसिस. ठीक है ना? Okay. Now try to understand this concept, because the questions, it will be integrated in nature, and these three things are integrated. Now BTR transparency. The enhanced transparency framework requires biennial transparency reports. All countries use the same common reporting table. The 2026 deadline, the second round of BTR is due by 31st of December 2026. This is a major test of India climate accounting and data integrity. This is that is mentioned in the different current affairs. Now go some steps pehle samjhiye. For example, what we have discussed? We have discussed that under Kyoto Protocol, it has been divided into developing countries. They have the binding limits itself. If they do not fulfill the binding limits, they will be what? Debarred from participating in the cap and carbon cap and trades. Okay? Capping and trading. Okay. Apart from that, we have what? Developing countries itself. For the developing countries, they will voluntarily participate. We do not have any sort of binding mechanisms. Now, under Paris climate change, what we have? We have two things. The developing countries, they will be taking individual NDC targets nationally determined contributions target. Okay, and those target, it will be talking about what? That we have to take certain initiative through which what? We will be keeping the temperature rise below 1.5 degrees Celsius. NDC, है ना? Now in NDC, two things are there. Okay, NDCs. Okay, NDCs, nationally determined contributions, set of targets, set of initiatives. Okay, set of initiatives. Okay, this set of initiative that is being undertaken, do you think it is binding in nature? It is not. Yeah, this is very much important. It is non-binding. It is what? This is non-binding. Non-binding under Paris Agreement. Under what? Paris Agreement. Just, but reporting is very much important. We have to report every time that these are the set of initiatives that we have undertaken for the purpose of what? Controlling, keeping the temperature within. So reporting is important. So reporting is mandatory. Reporting is mandatory. Okay. And this reporting is called what? Biennial transparency report. समझ में आ गया? This reporting comes under what? Biennial transparency report. That means after every 2 years, they have to report. They have to report. Reporting is mandatory. ठीक है ना? Okay. Now in this particular report, please have a look over here. समझिए. In this particular report, they will be reporting that these are the set of initiatives we have undertaken for the purpose of keeping the temperature below 1.5 degrees Celsius. This is mandatory. This is what? Mandatory. Second what? Once it will be reported, climate review committee, they will review. They will review it whether these are the initiatives taken or not. They have taken it or not, or whether it exists on the paper. ये भी ठीक है. One special mechanism is there. This is very much important. Try to understand the concept. That is called the peer review mechanism. That suppose India, he will ask Japan, okay, you have submitted this reporting mechanism whether you have taken such initiative or not. So this is called the peer mechanism. So all these things, they are very much important. These are mandatory. ठीक है ना? समझ में आ गया सभी को? ठीक. Now this reporting, so when you talk about this biennial transparency report, it's a reporting mechanism. It's a what? Reporting mechanism. That is this is a what? Reporting mechanism. Just write it down. I think this will be. Set of initiative. Okay, this is what? Non-binding, not non-binding, but reporting of NDCs. It is what? Binding, mandatory, and it comes under your biennial transparency report. Now the biennial transparency report, that is, it has to be submitted by each and every participating country. सब submit करेगा, each and every participating country. So this BTR is what? So BTR is what? It's a reporting mechanism. It's a reporting mechanism under Article 13. Now this BTR, it will be submitted by each and every country. Okay, the different countries it will be submitting, and because of that, we will have a what? Report card, and that report card is called what? Global stock stake. So this generated report card. This generated a report card, and this report card is called your global stock stake. Okay. So in this global, from this global stock stake, so now this is a what? Unlike Kyoto Protocol, that seems to be what? Not transparent in nature. This seems to be very much transparent in nature. This seems to be what? Very much transparent in nature. So it's a report mechanism. From this, what will happen? We will come to know whether the different set of initiatives that is undertaken by the different countries, It will keep the temperature below 1.5 degrees Celsius or not. So from this what? From this it can be ascertained whether the temperature will remain below 1.5 degrees Celsius or not. ठीक है ना? Okay, and all those data जो है this global stochastic, so this data is there in climate data hub. This data is there in climate data hub, and from this climate data hub, what the different companies, the different countries, they have to report. For example, the different countries, they have to go for a reporting mechanism. They will submit the indices, okay, and that is called a BTR. And from this BTR that is being submitted, what we will have global stochastic, and this global stochastic data, it will be available in your climate data hub itself. And from this climate data hub, what this in the reporting mechanism, what we have peer review mechanism. That means what we can view the different set of initiative, and we can question Japan also whether the different initiative what you want to take in, whether do you think this because of this different initiative we can keep the temperature below 1.5 degree Celsius. तो एक अच्छा सा यहाँ पे जो है एक analytical questions can be developed. ठीक है ना? BTR forms what? Global stochastic, है ना? एक अच्छा analytical. UPSC what is not interested in knowing the factual things, analytical. And review mechanism is very much important. So this is important. Okay. Now we'll discuss this in the last itself. So we have discussed about what? The different articles. Paris climate change we have discussed. We have to keep the temperature below 1.5 degrees. We have to keep the temperature below 2 degrees Celsius, but we have to keep it below 1.5 degrees Celsius. We have discussed the different articles. Articles important. Last time क्या हुआ था? एक article question based पूछा. For example, last time what? There was a question regarding one article. So this time obviously what? With less possibility that questions regarding articles can be framed. But obviously from the articles questions can be framed. For example, article 13 BTR. It seems to be very much important. So write it down in your note. BTR is very much important. Okay. So this is what Paris. We have discussed about Paris climate change. This is very much important. Now we have that. This is your Marrakech that took place in Morocco. Conference of Party how much? 22. CMP 12. CMP 12 Kyoto Protocol and CMA 1. That means what? Conference of Party after Paris Agreement. ठीक है ना? Okay. So here what you can see, the rule book deadline established a hard deadline of 2018 COP24 to finalize the guideline of Paris Agreement, provided the roadmap that eventually led to the Katowice rule book. Adaptation Fund decided that Adaptation Fund would officially serve the Paris Agreement, a major win for the developing nations to ensure continuity of Adaptation Fund. Marrakech Partnership launched the Marrakech Partnership for Global Climate Actions, formally created a space for non-state actors like cities, business investors to collaborate with the government. AA initiative launched for the adaptation of African agriculture, focused on soil management, water control, risk management for the African continent. Because when you talk about Africa, it's what non-developing in the developing phase itself. Okay. Now we have what? Conference of Party 26, Glasgow. The Conference of Parties 26 took place in Glasgow, and 21 hosted by UK in partnership with what? Italy. It served as a critical follow of the Paris Agreement, aiming to accelerate global temperature below 1.5 degrees Celsius. The Glasgow Climate Pact is the first ever climate deal to explicitly mention to reduce worst fossil fuel for the generation greenhouse gas. So remember one thing, this particular statement, it can be added in the Conference of Party 30 itself, that the Glasgow Climate Pact is the first ever climate deal to explicitly mention to reduce the coal, the worst fossil fuel for the greenhouse gas emissions. For the first time, it was recognized, it was being explicitly mentioned that slowly and gradually we have to transition away from what? Coal-based fossil fuels. क्या होता है कि when you talk about the conference of party 30, this particular statement it can be added that for the first time fossil fuel responsible for greenhouse gases it was being recognized. So we have seen that it was being recognized in conference of party 26. So this is how we have to interconnect. Now conference of party 26 Glasgow global goal, we have to with the different indices we have to what target to keep the temperature below 1.5 degrees Celsius, reaffirm the Paris Agreement goal but emphasizes that 1.5 degrees Celsius requires much faster action than 2 degrees Celsius. Fossil fuel phase down of coal we have discussed, ठीक है ना. First ever COP text to mention fossil fuels, the wording was changed from phase out to phase down at the last moment pushed by India and China. Earlier in the conference of party 26 they have used the term phase down. That means what, we have to completely cut down the use of fossil fuels and we have to transition away towards what, nuclear development. We have to transition away towards the renewable energy. But India and China, they said no, we will not accept it, and because of that phase down जो है, phase out it was to change to what, phase down. Phase down means what, slowly and gradually we have to transition away from the, phase out means what, completely, phase out means what, completely move from fossil fuels. Phase down means what, transitioning away from the fossil fuels. That means what, we will have fossil fuels but the newer development we have to develop green energies, ठीक है ना. this transitioning away, तो इसको याद रखिएगा terms को जो है, phase down, phase out, this, remember this term, it can be used as a keyword. Finance, double adaptation finance, developed nation agreed to at least double their collective provisions for climate finance for adaptation for developing nations from 2019 to 2025. Rule book article 6 finalized. We have discussed about the articles 6, article 6.2, 6.4. so this particular article, because we have discussed that Paris is living agreement, those articles they were being finalized under what, conference of party 26. Nature gas glow leaders declaration on over 140 countries pledged to halt reverse forest loss and land degradation by 2030 itself. Methane, global methane pledge, we have discussed it when we talk about like methane, they are also responsible for how much, 16 to 80% of the global warming itself. So we have what, global methane pledge led by USA, European Union, to reduce global methane emissions by 30% by 2030. India is not a signatory. Because why so? Because we have, just remember the concept, we have discussed about methane itself. We have discussed it in India when you talk about 40% of the emissions, it is actually coming from the agricultural side itself, ठीक है ना. And looking at the populations of India, do you think it is advisable? And because of that India didn't sign it, ठीक है. So from here, now from this conference of party 26 it's become important. Paris agreement we have discussed how it is important, because living agreement, this 6.2 and 6.4 it was being added from the gas flow itself. And in this, 3 things are important. First is what, phase down of coal. Second is what, article 6 finalized. And last is what, global methane. I have highlighted it, ठीक है. Okay. Now India's commitment, 5-fold strategy. The 5-fold strategy term Panchamrit. Panchamrit means what, 5 things are added for to fight climate change, was announced by India in 2026. So remember this word Panchamrit. Write it down in your prelims. 2020 Panchamrit. India's Panchamrit initiative. These are what? NDCs. These are what? These are all belongs to your NDC. NDC. Nationally determined contributions. That means what? It's mandatory that we have to report it under BTR. Okay. So first is what? 50% of India's energy will be sourced from renewables. Reduction in the carbon emissions by billion tons by 2030. India shall also reduce its emission intensity per unit of GDP by less than 45%. Earlier what was the target? 35%. But presently what is the target? 45%. Because this is a new NDC and we have discussed it's what, ratchet mechanism. Every time we have to move from the earlier one. 500 gigawatt of renewable energy to be installed by 2030 itself. To achieve net zero emissions target is what? 2070. India is also given the slogan of one life, one world at gas flow. One life, one world. The PM also called upon developed economies to make 1 trillion available for climate financing. Now I'll write it down. Mission One Life. Mission One Life also important. ठीक है. So leaders declaration on forest and land use. On the side of Conference of Party 26 climate negotiations, over 100 countries adopted a declaration on forest and land use. It is an ambitious declaration initiated by the UK to halt deforestation and land degradation by 2030. And you can see that this particular thing, it was mentioned in what United Nations Conference on to combat desertification. And what was the target? By 2030, we have to achieve what? Net land degradation neutrality by 2030. Okay, so it is what coinciding with this. In the plan, global leaders affirm the role of the forest in the balancing greenhouse gases emissions and removals, adapting to the impact of climate change. The declaration was 105 signatories, including USA, Russia, India, Argentina, Mexico, Saudi Arabia, South Africa are the only G20 countries that did not sign this particular declaration. Okay. Now, this is very much important. Mission life. So, mission life, it was given in the Conference of Party 26. In the Conference of Party 26, what are the three things we have most important? Article 6, global methane pledge. We have discussed India is not a signatory, and apart from that, mission life. Mission life. ठीक है ना? This is how to remove. Okay. Now, mission life means what? So, origin introduced by PM Modi at Conference of Party 26. India is the first country to include life in its official NDC. Official NDC means what? The fulfillment of this is not a binding target. Vision transition away from the mindless consumption to mindful utilizations. Directly aligns with the sustainable development goals. Mission life means what? With our activities, with your behavioral approach, we can also reduce carbon dioxide emissions. This is what it is talking about, the behavioral approach itself. The pro-planet people, a global network of individuals committed to sustainable living, shifting focus from government-led to citizen-led climate action. That means what? Citizen-led means what? This carbon dioxide emissions, it can be controlled with the help of behavioral approach. Basic motto, lifestyle of the planet, for the planet and by the planet. This particular statement, it can be developed. Lifestyle for the planet, lifestyle of the planet, for the planet and by the planet. किसका है मिशन? लाइफस्टाइल अंडर कॉन्फ्रेंस ऑफ पार्टी 27. स्टेटमेंट इज व्हाट फ्रॉम कॉन्फ्रेंस ऑफ पार्टी 26. तो ये याद रखिएगा. ओके. लीडिंग एजेंसी नीति आयोग. नाउ इट इज व्हाट? इनिशियल क्वेश्चन एंड मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ एनवायरनमेंट फॉरेस्ट एंड क्लाइमेट चेंज. सो दिस वाज योर व्हाट? ठीक है ना? कॉन्फ्रेंस ऑफ पार्टी 26. तो जस्ट रिमेंबर द थ्री थिंग्स वी हैव टू रिमेंबर. आर्टिकल 6, ग्लोबल मिथेन प्लेज, mission life. India is not a signatory of this thing. This is how I have to correlate. These are the four things what you have to remember. Okay. Now comes your Conference of Party 27, Thermal Sheikh 2022. Finance, here what? Loss and Damage Fund. A historic agreement to provide financial assistance to the vulnerable nations of the climate-induced damages, economic and non-economic, that cannot be avoided by the Adaptation Fund. Okay, जो vulnerable countries are because of the climate countries, because there are certain island states that are on the verge of submergence itself, because of what? Global warming itself. So we have to give them the fund. So it will be given under loss and damage fund. Implementation, Thermal Sheikh implementation program, the covered decision that calls for a global transformation of financial system requiring 4 to 6 trillion annually to support low carbon transitions, adaptations. Launched the first global plan to mobilize both state and non-state actors behind 13 adaptation target. Now, in this particular is important. Fast initiative. Food and agriculture for sustainable transformation, launched by the Egyptian presidency to improve climate finance for agriculture transformations. Okay. Climate means what? We are focusing toward the climate resilient agriculture. We have forestry, FCLP, Forest and Climate Leaders Partnership, a mechanism to track Glasgow place for halting forest loss. This thing. So this too is important. Okay, under it. Okay, first is what? Under Conference of Party 27, loss and damage fund. We have to see the for the loss and damage fund belongs to the adaptation fund. The vulnerable nations, they require this particular fund for the purpose of what? Sustainable development, or they can what? Cope up with the climate. Second is what? Fast initiative, food and agriculture sustainable transformation. This one is what? Forest and climate leadership partnership, because in the conference of party, what we have seen, by 2030 we have to restore the degraded land. So these three are important points. India's role and long-term strategy of conference of party 27. Long-term low emission development strategy. India submitted its key roadmap to reach net zero by 2070, focusing on 7 key sectors. Phase down motion, phase down. India, we can see global methane pledge, he did not sign it, and apart from that, phase cut, it was being removed by India and China, and because of that, we have what? Phase down, that means transitioning away from the fossil fuels. So India proposed a phase down of all the fossil fuels, not just coal. Okay. Mission life, here also global recognition. India mantra for lifestyle for environment was formally included in the cover text of this one. So it was, if you go onto the site, the cover page, it reflects what? Mission life. We have discussed about the mission life. It was being incorporated in conference of party 26. Climate finance, demand for clarity. India pushed for a clear definition of climate finance to prevent developed nations from greenwashing existing loans as climate aid. Okay, that means what? Here the term greenwashing is important. That means what? They are diverting the funds for the development of certain project itself, but they are diverting it. They are giving it to the nation under the claim of what? Sustainable development mechanism. So this is your greenwashing itself. They are going for the development of polluting industries under the guise of your, ठीक है ना, greenwashing itself. तो यहाँ पे आप देख सकते हैं, mission life seems to be very much important. It was on the cover page, and apart from that, we have, I think, yes, these two factors are important. ठीक है. Now conference of party 28. देखिए, lots of things are there in conference of the party 30s. If you go, we have more than 40 to 50 elements are there. But UPSC will be exploring only few things. So उसको कैसे करने का? You should know the essence of the topic. ठीक है? Three pillars of the conference of party UAE consensus. First is what? Global stochastic. We have discussed what is global stochastic. The biennial transparency report that is being submitted by each and every nations. Ultimately, what? It will be collected and that will be forming what? Global stochastic. It is a report card that shows that whether the different set of target that is being taken under the indices, that what is under the compliance, whether the temperature it will be living, whether that particular temperature it will be within the limit of 1.5 degrees Celsius or not. It's a what? Report card. Report card generated by what? Reporting of BTR. Reporting of BTR under Article 13, and this it generates what? Climate Hub report. So legal basis Article 14 of the Paris Agreement. Article 13 forms what? BTR, and finally Article 14 it develops what? Global stochastic cycle every 5 years. The ratchet mechanism forces country to update. That means what? Ratchet mechanism, every time we have to what? Update our NDC, and it must be what? Higher one. India must align its 2025 NDC updated with GST, finding 43% cut by this thing, greenhouse gases. Energy transitions mentions all fossil fuels, language transitioning away. Earlier what we have used? Phase down in conference of party 26. And in this particular conference of party 28, what we are using? Transitioning away. We have not used phase cut itself. ठीक है ना? Transitional fuels acknowledge natural gases as a bridge fuel. CBDR, common but differentiated responsibility. Transitions must be just, orderly and equitable. India supports phase down of coal. India supports phase down of coal but resisted by phase cut for energy security itself. Now, third is what? Renewable efficiency. That means what? In conference of party 28, triple capacity of 11,000 gigawatt by 2030. Renewable energy, we have to, how much? We have to triple the capacity. Energy efficiency, double the rate from 2 to 4%. The first fuel in efficiency is the fastest way to cut demand initiative, India's Panchamrit, PAT scheme and Ujala, non-carbon dioxide, that means methane, short-lived climate pollutant. In this particular, we are focusing towards what? Methane itself. So we have discussed it is a short-lived. What is the life? 20 years. But when you talk about the global warming potential, it is much higher. How much? 80 times. Survival versus India protects paddy livestock sectors. So India didn't sign earlier in Conference of Party 226. What we have seen, India didn't sign this methane, global methane place, because when you talk about India, still maximum percentage of people, they are what? Dependent upon the agriculture itself. Loss and damage fund operationalized on day first, aimed at compensating vulnerable nations. World Bank is the intermittent host. So what? The loss and damage fund, it has activated in the Conference of Parties. Conference of Party में क्या हुआ था? Start हुआ था. New collective quantified goals. Okay. Success, we have discussed about the new collective quantified goal. It is being mentioned in Article 9. It is being mentioned in Article 9. Okay. So successor of 100, earlier what was the target? 100 billion, but presently we are thinking that we should have how much? 3 billions, but it is still not enough for the global south. How much it is being required? $1.3 trillion. Adaptation finance, call for the doubling of adaptation finance. Okay. Now India, we will see major sectoral pledges and declaration. Conference of Party 28, global cooling pledge, reduce cooling emissions by 68% by 2050 itself. India is not a signatory of it. Global renewables and EE pledge, triple renewables and double energy rate. India is not a signatory. Triple nuclear rate, not a signatory. Climate and health, not a signatory. Just a moment. We have discussed this. Okay. We are talking about Conference of Party 29. Okay. So in Conference of Party 28, what we have under Article 9, we have this new collective quantified goal. So we are discussing on our Conference of Party 29. Core target is how much? We have discussed USD how much? $300 billion is being required. Broad scale for the global south development, how much it is? 1.3 trillion. Successor, it replaced 2009 goal of USD this much. Lead developed countries are the mandate to take the lead in this mobilization. That means what? If the developed countries are, that is responsible for the pollution, so ultimately the lead it will be taken by the developed countries itself. Article 6.2, carbon market, it is being clearly mentioned over here. Carbon markets we have discussed. It allows you, because of this only, this Conference of Party 29, the question it was being asked in your paper. Article 6.2, it talks about what? Bilateral carbon trading that is happening between the two countries itself for the purpose of carbon credit itself. And we have Article 6.4, that is under, that is a what? Centralized. It is under the, it is taking place under the supervision of United Nations. A particular developed country, it can what? Fund, it can go for the technology transfer for developing certain green project in the private sector also. It replaces what? Clean development mechanism of the Kyoto Protocol. It comes under your sustainable development mechanism. And because since it was there in the news, we have this question. Now, other in Conference of Party 29 is what? Methane from organic waste. Target the waste sector, 20% of the global methane. Encourage sectoral targets in indices. We have discussed that when you talk about like organic waste are there. If they undergo the process of what? Anaerobic decomposition, what they release? Methane gases. And because of that, what we have seen under this global methane pledge, we have to cut down the methane emissions by 30%, but India is not a signatory of it. So methane from the organic waste, it is mentioned in your Conference of Party 29. Baku Harmonia Initiative, a platform in partnership with Food and Agricultural Organization to streamline climate initiative and finance for the farmer, focused on food, agriculture, climate nexus. Baku Work Plan, indigenous peoples, bridge indigenous knowledge with science where the local communities and indigenous people participation, prioritize gender responsive implementation. So this is also important, write it down. Okay. Conference of Party 29. Conference of Party 29. Baku work plan that takes into account the knowledge and science of the local people, the knowledge and science of the local people. ठीक है ना? For the purpose of sustainable development. Okay. So Baku, it's what? Conference of Party 29. Bridge indigenous knowledge with science via the local communities and indigenous people platform, prioritizes gender responsive implementation. Lima work 10-year extension, this is not required so much. Okay. Now India strategic extension objectives, we have what? Rejected USD $300 billion. Initiated what? India demanded 1.3 trillion annually for the global south development. Articles 9 infringement, objected to shifting financial responsibility to all the actors including developing nations itself. Under Article 9, the legal responsibility to provide finance lies with the developed countries itself. Okay. Solidarity with LDCs, low developing countries, backed with least developed countries and a small island state. India leads group like BASIC, LMDC, like-minded developing countries. NDC achievement, emission intensity reduced by 33 to 35%, 40% non-fossil energy met. India leadership is seen through the ISA, International Solar Alliance and missions life itself. ठीक है ना? So India has objected to this. That means what? Under NGQC, what we have said, the target is how much? 300. But India said no, this target is not requirement. What is the target is required? 1.3 trillion approximately. And apart from that, here you can see that when you talk about the Article 9, the funds it must be coming from the developed nation itself because they were responsible for polluting the countries. But here in Article 9, जो है वहाँ पे in this particular Conference 29, it says that the fund it must be coming from the developing nation itself. So India what? Objected to it. Okay. Now Conference of Party 30. So this is important. We'll take a gap of 15 minutes and we'll again start. ठीक है ना? So we will start with what? Conference of Party 30, and definitely one sort of question will get from the Conference of Party 30. Definitely one it will be coming, but lots of things are there. So we will be discussing the most important one. Okay. So Conference of Party 30, it is held in what? Brazil, which coincided with the 10th anniversary of the Paris Agreement about UNFCCC Conference of Party 30, hosted in the Amazon region. So Amazon region, so definitely what? It's called the lungs of the world. So that means what? Here we will be talking about the protection of the forest. It will be concerned with the protection of the forest itself. The summit was framed called the Conference of Implementation, Conference of Truth, and the Forest Conference of Party. That means what we are talking about the forest, rooted in the spirit of Mutero, inclusion and so when you talk about this Mutero is what? It's a term that talks about what? Participatory approach of local indigenous people for the protection of forest. Quite simple. That means when you talk about the climate change, it cannot be solved by the hegemon approach. That means what? One particular single country, they cannot solve this climate problem. Each and every country, they should participate for the purpose of what? Controlling the climate. So Motiro means what? Talks about participatory approach. Participatory approach of local indigenous people. Local indigenous people. Clear? It concluded with the adoption of Belém package by 195 parties, including agreement of topics such as just transition, adaptation, finance, trade, gender and technology. Okay. So the most important is what? Implementation work program, Mutero decision. First is what? Belém mission is what? We have to limit the temperature rise within what? 1.5 degree Celsius. So launched by Troika, UAE, Azerbaijan and Brazil. It is being this particular Belém mission, it is being launched by this particular Troika nations. Primary purpose, action oriented platform to foster international cooperation across mitigations, adaptation and investment designed to keep the global rise of temperature within 1.5 degree Celsius. Global Implementation Accelerator, a voluntary initiative to support countries in the translating their NDC and National Action Plan into what? Concrete actions. We have discussed when we talk about the NDC, it is not binding in nature. Obviously, the binding is what? The reported mechanism. But presently with this, in the coming future, what we will be talking about this NDCs, translating the NDCs and into concrete actions. It is still not been converted into what? Binding target. But whatever the NDCs, it is on the paper, it should be on action. And because of this particular motive is called your Conference of Party implementation. COP implementation. That means so that if NDCs it is on the paper, we have to what? Implement it. National Adaptations for Plans Implementation Alliance, United Nations Development, Italy, Germany, and the Global Network NDC Partnership support the implementation of NAPs and mobilizes public-private investment. We'll covering the important ones. Yes. So this is important. Highlight it. Tropical Forest Cover Facility. Write it down. Conference of Party 30. Tropical Forest Cover Facilities. Okay. So here you can see. Okay. From this, the questions can be framed. What is the fund size under this tropical fund forest cover facility? 125 billion. Eligible 74 nations with moist broadleaf forest. 74 nations are applicable which have this tropical forest. 2-tier managed by the Secretariat and Investment Fund. Payout $4 per hectare year for conservation. That means what, these particular 74 nations, they will be getting $4 per hectare for the purpose of conserving, of the tropical forest. India join it as a absorber. So do you think India will get it? No, India is joined it as what? Absorber. And because of that, India won't be getting this $4 per hectare. ठीक है, तो इंडिया को ये फैसिलिटी नहीं मिलेगा. ठीक है, ओके. Scaling J rate plus coalition goal mobilize 3 to 6 billion year by 2030 to reverse deforestation. Jurisdiction channels finance to the entire forest jurisdiction, state, province rather than isolated projects. It will be covering the entire forest. Alliance with India long-term rate plus strategy, forest positive and food system. Okay. So first is important. Second is your resilient agriculture investment for net zero land degradation, raise accelerator. So this is also important, right, John? Resilient agricultural investment for net zero land degradation. Goal how much? We have discussed. Restore 3 million hectares of degraded farmland. Inspiration based on Brazil Greenway and Eco Invest. ठीक है ना? Coordinated by Food and Agricultural Organization, Food and Land Use Coalition, consultative groups on international agriculture, G20 Land Restoration Initiative, World Bank. Blended finance. Here we are getting what? Blended finance. Blended finance means what? Mixed finance. Mixed finance. ठीक है? Okay. Uses public money to de-risk private capital for soil restoration, including private banks. This is important. Okay. This blended finance. Blended finance means what? For example, we have discussed that even now the private sector, they can participate for the development of the project itself. But in the beginning of the project, if private sector will participate, there is a problem whether this project is financially viable or not. So for the purpose of that, what? First public money will come into picture. First the money from Green Climate Fund. First the money from Green Climate Fund. You must be knowing about Green Climate Fund. Are you aware of it? What is Green Climate Fund? We'll discuss. Okay. Green Climate Fund. First the funding will come from the Green Climate Fund. Okay. The project will start, and after that, looking at the sustainability of the project, when the project is in the developmental phase, even the private party can invest on it. अगर आपसे कहा जाए कि अभी यहाँ पे मुझे नया प्रोजेक्ट स्टार्ट करना है, तो क्या होगा? आप नहीं करिएगा. लेकिन आपको जब दिख रहा है कि प्रोजेक्ट स्टार्ट हो चुके, सारी मशीनरीज आ चुके, गवर्नमेंट के साथ कॉन्ट्रैक्ट बन चुके, तब तो कीजिएगा ना. तो दैट मीन्स व्हाट? प्राइवेट along with that philanthropist, for example Bill Gates Melinda Association is there. Okay ना? He will also invest. तो यहाँ पे लिखा हुआ, इसमें देखिए, blended finance uses public money to de-risk private capital for soil conservation. First public money it will be invested, and after that, looking at that, the sustainability of that particular project, private money it will be invested, including private banks, commercial loans to bridge the global restoration funding. Funding and technical supports are provided by the World Bank, Green Climate Fund, sovereign funds, and the philanthropist partners. ठीक है ना? See, there is a difference between GEF, Global Environment Facility, and Green Climate Fund. What is the difference? Confusion है? अफीजा या नफीजा? अफीजा, बताइए. चलिए समझते हैं हम लोग थोड़ा सा. There is a difference between Global Environmental Facility and Green Climate Fund. This word terms can be confused. थोड़ा सा समझ लेते हैं हम लोग. Okay. Now, when you talk about Global Environmental Facility, we have developed. It was developed just after 1992 Earth Summit. Developed after 1992 Earth Summit. Earth Summit. Okay. Apart from that, what is the major functions of it? It is responsible for what? biodiversity conservation, land degradation, is it, and climate change. It is broad. It has what? Broad topic. Broad topics. For example, it is responsible for your biodiversity conservation, land degradation, and somewhat climate change. But when you talk about this Green Climate Fund, it was developed in Conference of Party 16. It was developed in Conference of Party 16, can come in 2012 itself. Now, when you talk about Green Climate Fund, it is responsible for what? For the purpose of providing the funds for mitigation and adaptation. For mitigation and adaptation. Mitigation means what? Carbon sequestration technologies, and adaptation means what? Funding to the island nation so that what they can save themselves from this rising sea level. So this is what it also it is. इसके पास they have huge fund. They have what? Huge fund, and this is in particularly used for mitigation and adaptation. Mitigation and adaptation. For example, suppose if a country adopts, consider it, if we are developing renewable energy, for example, renewable energy, suppose solar-based project is there. So obviously, when you talk about the solar-based project, it comes under your mitigation program. Is it okay? So because of this, now we will be getting the fund from Green Climate Fund itself. Okay, and when you talk about the adaptation means what? Adaptation means what? Looking at this climate change, we have to what? The indigenous people look over there, they have to adapt to the climate change. So obviously what? It will be given to the, which one? Island countries. Adaptation fund also. So this is the difference. Is it okay? Now, for example, one thing you must remember, suppose, for example, we will be talking about mitigation strategies. So mitigation is also related to climate change. So what will happen? The earliest stage funding means what? For example, early stage funding means what? The idea. Obviously, we need money for the purpose of idea generation. So early stage funding, it will be coming from GEF, Global Environmental Facility. And after that, when the idea has been generated, the complete money it will be coming from Green Climate Fund. Initial project it will be coming from, initial money it will be coming from GEF, and after that, the complete money it will be coming from Green Climate Fund. Okay. So this was important. Now, Baku Harmonia initiative from Conference of Party 29, dispersed land scale initiative for the food and agriculture, presidency plus food and agricultural organization. Farmer access simplifies the process of the farmer to find climate finance and technical support. So this is what we are talking about, the adaptation fund. So when you talk about the adaptation fund, it will be coming from Global Green Climate Fund. Okay. Is it okay? Next is what? Implementation, market and industrialization. It's all we are discussing on the what? Conference of Party 30. So second is your what? Initiative, fostering investable national implementation supported by IDB and Green Climate Fund. Okay, IDB and Green Climate Fund. So IDB is what? Interdevelopmental American Bank. Okay, so when you talk about the IDB, so basically the funds, always remember the funds, it will be given from, we have discussed that funds, it will be coming from GEF, but GEF in this particular adaptation and mitigation project, he will be investing the early stage, and after that the complete fund, it will be coming from Green Climate Fund. Apart from that, when you talk about the implementation of the project, who will be responsible for who will be responsible for managing that particular thing? So which one? IDB, it's a private bank. So do you think private bank will 100% invest? It won't invest. So it will be responsible for the implementation of the project. It will be funding. It will be funding. जो है maximum funding it will be coming from here, funding. Maximum funding it will be coming from this green climate fund, and after that the implementation of the project it will be taken care by IDB. Implementation of the project. Implementation of the project. It doesn't mean कि he won't contribute money. He will also, this particular bank will also contribute. लेकिन starting जो होगा सारा it will be coming from green climate fund. Aims to make national adaptation plans. Investable target 1 trillion project pipeline 2028. Open coalition on compliance carbon market. Brazil, China, European Union, UK, Canada, and Singapore focus on MRV monitoring, reporting, and verifications and harmonizing carbon pricings. Belém declaration of green industrialization. 35 countries and organizations accelerating the decarbonization of heavy emitting industries. Okay. Steel, cement while promoting green growth. That means what we are focused. We are focusing toward the green economy. Okay. Now, power system and coal to clean transition. Coal to clean transition. We have not used the term what? Phase down. Okay. So first is what? Plan for expansion and resilience of power grid. Green grid initiative. Green grid initiative. For example, we have in the power grid for the purpose of transmissions. Now in the coming future, maybe we will have the separate grid that will be totally what? A green grid. That means for that particular green grid, it will be responsible for what? Transmitting green energy, the energy that is being transmitted from the renewable sources. So primary purpose, coordinate stakeholders for grid expansion and modernization to support a renewable heavy future. Endorse that 1 trillion annual investment pipelines for grids storage. Just you should know these things are there. You do not have to remember these particular details. You should know that when you talk about the conference of party, it talks about what? Green grid for the purpose of development of another transmission line that will be responsible for carrying away the green energy. That's it. Power to accelerate coal transition, packed power, powering past coal aliens. That means what? We have to slowly move from coal towards the greener energy, transitioning away. A roadmap to fast track the move from coal to the clean energy while maintaining energy security. Focus on entire early retirement and proposing in coal plants in coal dependent economics like Indonesia. This now this is also important. Belém 4 pledges on sustainable fuels. This is important. Belém 4x pledge for sustainable. 4x means what? 4 times. So Italy, Japan, India, and Brazil. Write it down. India is also involved in Belém 4 pledge. X means what? 4 times. Quadruple the use of sustainable fuels, hydrogen, biofuels, and e-fuels by 2035. That means what? We have to increase our capacity up to how much? 4 times. As per the conference of party, 30. Belém 4x. And India is also involved. That hydrogen, biofuels, and e-fuels uses IEA, International Atomic Energy Agency. International Atomic Energy Agency. We have discussed in Science and Tech. To track progress, focus on hard to abate sector, aviation, shipping, and steel industry. That means what? Slowly and gradually we have to what? Quadruple. We have to, for example, when you talk about our this hydrogen, green hydrogen energy, we have green hydrogen missions also. So we have to what? Increase the energy. How much? We have 4 times, and we have increased or not. It will be taken care by International Atomic Energy Agency. That is responsible. If you remember, that is responsible for the purpose of what? Checking whether the nations they are maintaining the uranium enrichment or not. For example, when you talk about the Iran. It's under the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. What is the limit? It's 3 point something like that. That is the uranium enrichment level. Now, social equality and gender governance. Belém Gender Action Plan 2026 to 2030 for 9 years implements Lima Work Program, focuses on 27 specific actions including gender responsive budgeting, protecting women's environmental defenders. Focuses on intersectionality, recognizing the specific needs of the indigenous and rural women climate policy. So here what? Women's को भी ध्यान दिया जा रहा है. Belém Declaration of Hunger and Poverty, integrated with G20 goals, links climate resilience with zero hunger, targets crop insurance and social protection for small scale farmers, synergizes with the Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty. So when this, see, obviously UPSC, you won't be asking all 2 to 3, 5 questions from this particular section. Only 1 or 2 questions definitely will be asked. So this particular statement, it will be included when we talk about the conference of party 32. Okay, it talks about what? Meteorau, which takes into account women budgeting. or which takes into account indigenous women, how they are responsible for conserving the forest. That statement, it will be what? Correct. ठीक है? We have Belém Health Action Plan, WHO Brazil plus 36 and 30 countries, 30 million initial seed funds focus on climate resilient hospitals, heat, flood related disease and surveillance. That means what, जो भी हमारा climate के कारण हो रहा है, basically what, global warming के कारण जो problem हो रहा है, world first, the first international adaptation plan dedicated exclusively to health sector. So this question, obviously the questions it will be include like the world first, for the first time the health sector it was being incorporated into what, conference of party, dedicated flood hospitals, dedicated what, flood related disease surveillance, it will be established in the island nation itself. So that statement it will be what, correct. Declaration on information integrity, UNESCO, Brazil, United, counting the climate disinformation, denialism and greenwashing commits to evidence based science strategic notes. First time information integrity was appeared in the official COP agenda. India is an observer. India is also what, observer. That means what, अगर कुछ false information दे रहे हैं तो what, we will be asked by the other nation states. Just remember one thing we have discussed. For example, we have to, under NDCs we have to submit the reports. Okay, submit the reports. Now when the report is being submitted under BTR, it forms global stake, and that global stake it will be published under what, climate hub, climate data hub itself. Now the other nations they will what, check it whether the data that we have put over there, whether they are correct or incorrect. If it is false, the other nations can what, question. The same thing. So it talks about information integrity. So here we have, first time we have health sector, we have what, information integrity. Early warning and disaster resilience. So we have Cruise 230 strategy, Canada chair implementing partner WMO World Bank, and this one goals 100% coverage for LDCs and SIDS by 2030 with essential early warning system. Least developed countries and small island state countries, obviously what those countries they will be getting affected. So when you talk about the green climate fund, green climate fund it will be coming into picture for the purpose of what, providing them with what, adaptation funds. Transformation shift from project based to country owned system, reach 300 million plus people 2015, aims for 200 million more by 2030. Call for action to wildfire resilience, Brazil 40 plus partners, because you have seen that when we talk about the Brazil, it is often in the news regarding what, forest fires. So paradigm shift moves from the mere firefighting to integrated fire management, focused on prevention and landscape restoration. Global first, wildfires are now officially treated as global climate priority, includes a focus on the traditional control burns by indigenous community. We have discussed Mutira, that means what, indigenous people will come into picture, indigenous women. When you talk about the forest fire, obviously what, the local people, the local indigenous tribes, they are better acquainted with the technology, how to extinguish the fire. So their science, the technology, they should be what, inculcated. यहाँ से बहुत generalized statement बनेंगे. Data, finance and urban resilience, we have systematic observation impact bond, launched by Systematic Observation Financing Facility, a United Nations fund created by UNEP, WMO, United Nations Development Program, world first impact bond on weather data, finance the global basic observing network to fix data gaps, global Mutira against extreme heat, conference of party 30 presidency and cool coalition, reduce the heat risk for 3 billion people and integrate solutions, scaling up nature based solutions. कैसे कोरिलेट करेंगे, नेचर बेस्ड सोल्यूशन, बिकॉज म्यूटिरा मीन्स व्हाट, इंडिजिनस पीपल मीन्स व्हाट, दे विल बी टेकिंग व्हाट, इंडिजिनस टेक्नोलॉजी इज व्हाट, इट्स द नेचर बेस्ड सोल्यूशन इटसेल्फ. तो दिस इज हाउ वी हैव टू कोरिलेट चीज को. देखिए एवरी टाइम इट्स वेरी डिफिकल्ट टू कोरिलेट ईच एंड एवरीथिंग. म्यूटिरा, कोलैबोरेटिव एक्शन, कलेक्टिव एक्शंस, इंडिजिनस पीपल, वुमेन्स विल आल्सो बी कंसीडर्ड, इंडिजिनस एक्शन विल कम इनटू पिक्चर. दैट मीन्स व्हाट, नेचर सोल्यूशन. ठीक है ना. Food, methane and soil innovation. We have Global Carbon Harvest Coalition, research bodies from India, Indian Council of Agriculture Research, Brazil and Kenya, accelerate field research on soil, organic carbon, biochar and rock weathering. India is the founding member, focuses on strategizing soil-based carbon removal. Okay, soil organic carbon, it is very much important. It is very much essential for what? Fertility itself. Here in this particular case, if you talk about the soil degradation and land degradation is what? Conversion of desert. How the desert will get converted? First, your soil organic carbon will move away. So यहाँ पे we are considering this. No organic waste, supported by global methane hub. Commit to cut 30. Already we have seen conference of party 30 itself. We have what? Global methane. India has not participated in it because India methane कहाँ से आता है? Methane is generated from the agriculture sector. India is not a signatory. Food waste breakthrough. Target having global food waste by 2030 reduces 7% global methane. Because the food waste जो रहता है, if we have to reduce the food, if the food waste is kept outside, what will happen? Those food waste, they will go for the anaerobic decomposition, and because of that, what they will be releasing? Methane. So obviously, what we have to control the methane releases. So from 2026 onward, you can see that this global methane pledge is there, and India is not a participant. That means what? From 2026 to 2030 itself, we are focusing toward the reducing methane itself from the food waste. Yes, for the first time, this कहाँ पे दिया हुआ था? Conference of Party 26. That you have to remember. Now, ocean, land, and heavy industries. Indigenous land tenure. 15 governments legally recognize 160 million hectares of community land by 2030. Linked to TFF, 20% of the forest payment goes to these communities. Utilities of net zero established at Conference of Party 28. Invest 1 trillion by 2030 to modernize power grid. Target the bottleneck of the energy transition. Grid integration. We have discussed about the development of green grids. Super pollutant accelerator. Climate and clean energy coalition. 3-year program to drive reductions in methane, black carbon, and HFCs. Focused on ODA eligible developing countries. Ozone depleting. Okay. So this is what we have discussed. Just a moment. Solve these questions. Few questions are there. देखिए, try to remember 4 or 5 things from Conference of Party 30. First is what? This is called Mutual Agreement. First thing, that means what? Indigenous people. Indigenous people means what? Local knowledge will come into picture. Nature-based solution will come into picture. Cooperative solution. Fourth is what? उसके बाद आपने क्या देखा यहाँ पे? From Conference of Party 26, we are talking about what? Methane emissions, है ना? Methane, global methane pledge. India is not a participant. That means what? अब कोई भी चीज आपको लगता है that is related to the methane emissions, we have to participate. India is not a signatory, but that thing is there. ठीक है ना? उसके बाद what? Forest, we are focusing towards the, because this conference of party is called Forest Conference of Party, and because of that we have dedicated funds. We have dedicated TFF funds for the purpose of what? Restoring the forest, but India is not a participant. Why? Because India is acting as an observer state itself, and that particular forest, it must be belonging to tropical forest itself. ठीक है ना? And here what? For the first time, we are talking about the climate disaster. Climate disaster. So climate disaster means what? Obviously, we have dedicated funds for the development of hospitals, for the development of flood-related disease surveillance system. So if you remember this thing, you can solve the questions. ठीक है ना? Lots of things are there. You have to study it, but these are the points that what you have to remember. Okay. Solve this question. Balance package adopted Conference of Party. It marked the first time a global implementation tracker which was institutionalized to monitor the alignment of revised nationally determined contribution with 1.5 degrees Celsius. Second state is missing. Huh? Leave it there. Leave it. I will update it, don't worry. Okay, solve this question. The Tropical Forest Forever Facility launched in Conference of Party 30 represents a paradigm shift in the conservation finance. In this text, evaluate the following statement. The TFF is a permanent trust fund that rewards developing tropical forest with a fixed payment based on the area of the forest preserved rather than the carbon credit sold. True. Okay. Unlike the Green Climate Fund, the TFF operates primarily on the market logic model, leveraging private senior capital against public sponsor capital. India has joined TTF as a founding member, making it eligible for the annual payment. No, it is an observer state. Okay, 3 is wrong. So what will the answer? C. A mandated 20% of the fund received by the country and the TFF must be directed toward the indigenous people and traditional local communities. Because remember one thing, This belongs to Conference of Party 30, Mutirao, local communities, local indigenous people. So obviously what this particular funds, and this fund, it is being developed over as obviously this fund, it will be allocated to the, for the development of traditional people. Okay? This one, the concept of global Mutirao was introduced in Conference of Party 30 to reframe climate action. With reference to this global action plan on adaptation, consider the following. The global Mutirao decision calls for the tripling of adaptation finance by developing nation by 2035. The Baku to Belém roadmap established a set of 59 voluntary indicators to measure the progress across thematic themes like water security, food and health. Under the new adaptation framework, developed countries are required to provide 1.3 trillion annually in grant equivalent finance specifically for the adaptation. Which one? Solve it. Okay. 1 and 2. 3 is wrong. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Under the new adaptation framework, developed countries are required to provide 1.3 trillion annually in grant. No. How much? 300 billion. 300. This was the projected that it will be required by the global south. This statement is wrong. Okay. Now we have discussed about the nationally determined contributions. We have discussed that after Paris Agreement, it is essential that Paris climate that we have to give our national determined contributions. Submitting is mandatory, but what are the things that is being mentioned? It is not mandatory. It's not binding in nature. So we will see nationally determined contributions. So these targets are submitted as a part of 5-year update cycle required under Article 4.9 of the Paris Agreement. Okay? Yes. Don't get confused. We have discussed that under Paris Agreement, we have developed this NDC. It works under what? Ratchet mechanism. Every 5 year, we have to set the target. Every 5 years, set the target, and after every 5 year, we have to revise it. It must be higher one. But this target, we are actually moving. After every 2 years, we have to see how much we have achieved, and this has to be reported in terms of BTR. That forms your global stochastic. 2 साल में कितना है? ठीक है ना? So required under 4.9 of the Paris Agreement, the 2035 targets represent an accelerated trajectory to bridge the gap between India's goal 2030 and 2070 net zero commitment. For example, here you can see emission 2030 target was how much? 45% reduction from 2005 level. Here how much? 65%. Non-fossil capacity 40%. The electric power capacity is coming from the non-fossil. Here how much? 80%. This has been given. Emissions parking, no official peak year declared. Peak year 2035. Renewable energy 500 gigawatt. But here how much? 1200 gigawatt solar plus wind forces. Carbon sink 2.5 to 3 billion tons of carbon dioxide emissions. And hence things include blue carbon also. That means what? Blue economy. Okay, na? So here you can see that it's worked on the ratchet mechanism. The target is higher. Every year we have to report whether how much we are moving. For example, this target is of 5 years. Now, if after 5 years, if the review is being done, we have not achieved, we cannot done anything. And because of that, when you talk about the BTR, every 2 years we have to give whether we are actually moving toward the target or not. Okay, go through these targets. Okay, now here one thing, conditionality. Unlike previous NDC, the 2035 targets are partially conditional. This means achieving that full 80% non-fossil capacity depends upon the transfer of technology and low-cost international climate finance. It is conditional that we will shift up to 80% of the power that will be generated from the renewable sources. But what? We should receive the fund from Green Climate Fund. If you receive it, then only we will move towards the development of greener technology. This is what? Conditional. अगर होगा इसलिए UPSC can explore this. Okay. Referring 300 billions to 1.5 trillion debate. Carbon credit trading system under the Energy Conservation Amendment 2022. India is launching its own domestic carbon market. It will transition from the older PAT scheme to the more comprehensive market by 2026. Earlier, what we have under the Energy Conservation Perform, Achieve and Trade. The transition from the PAT Perform, Achieve and Trade scheme to the CCTS carbon credit trading scheme is a pivotal shift of India's climate shift. It is a shift from measuring energy efficiency or measuring greenhouse gas emission. Earlier, when you talk about the PAT Perform, Achieve and Trade, we are talking about what? Energy effectiveness, energy efficiency. But now it is moving toward the carbon CCT, carbon credit trading system. In carbon credit trading system, we are talking about the emissions of greenhouse gases. So write it down. CCTS. CCTS. Okay. So earlier, what we have PAT Perform, Achieve and Trade. Okay, foundation. But presently, this one. So focus is what was energy and intensity. For example, slowly and gradually we have moved toward the LED bulbs, because LED bulb is what? It's very much effective in nature. The 100-watt bulbs, it can be replaced with what? 10 watt of LED bulbs. So this comes under your PAT, but we are not concerned with the greenhouse gases emissions. But presently we are moving towards CCTS. It talks about your greenhouse emissions. So energy intensity, emission intensity, greenhouse gas emission per unit of output. Here what we will ES certificates, energy saving certificates are being given, but here what? Carbon credit certificates are being given. Okay. Okay, these points are important. Yes. Solve these questions. Okay. Here you Conference of Party 30. India announced that it will achieve 2030 NDC target of 50% non-fossil fuel electric under 5 years ahead of the scheme. This is also true. India revised NDC 3 includes a mandatory commitment to absolute reduction in the greenhouse gases emissions, moving away from its previous mandatory to hai nahi. We have discussed it is not mandatory. Third is what? The Belém Forex package endorsed by India, Japan and Brazil aims to quadruple global use of sustainable fuels, including green hydrogen biofuels. This is so. And 2 is what? Incorrect. Okay. India diplomatic push at Conference of Party focused heavily on the new collective quantified goals. Consider the following statement regarding the India's stance. India called for a clear, universally agreed definition of climate finance to prevent the counting of commercial loans and OD at climate specific. India has talked about what? Greenwashing of the fund. Remember, greenwashing of the fund. So this statement is what? True. India supported the operationalization of the just transition mechanism at Conference of Party 30, emphasizing the burden of mitigation should not fall on the low-income population of the global south. Support kiya the global south and island countries. True. India successfully negotiated for the inclusion of unilateral trade restrictive measures as a violation of Paris Agreement principle within the Belém package. This is also what? True. We have discussed about the India Panchamrit. Now, green credit program. Write it down. Green credit is also important. 2026 green credit. It will be asked in coordination with Forest Conservation Amendment and Revised Rule 2026. write it down. Green Credit Program in coordination with Forest Conservation Amendment Act and Revised Rule 2026. Okay. Green credit. Now, if you can recall, under a Forest Conservation Act 2025, under latest Supreme Court intervention, and because of that, we have the latest guidelines that when you talk about like private entities, they can also participate on what carrying out the plantation, afforestation on the non-degraded, on the degraded land itself, and that activity, it will be considered the forestry activity. That means what they do not have to go for what compensatory afforestation. They do not have to go what NPA. Now the afforestations that is being created if it's sustained for 5 years and they have a canopy cover of 40%, they will be getting what green credit. They will be getting what green credit. So we'll remember this is the statement. So we will see the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change has issued a new methodology for calculating green credit for tree plantation under the Green Credit Rules 2023 enacted on Environmental Protection Act 1986. About green credit means a singular unit of an incentive provided to the specified activity delivering a positive impact on the environment. This credit can be traded on a dedicated exchange similar to how carbon credits are traded. Note, green credit are different from the carbon credit granted under the carbon credit trading scheme operating under the Environmental Conservation Act. Green credit क्या है? Claim of green credit after 5 years of restoration on degraded forest land and achieving a minimum 40% canopy cover. You won't get it the day. Suppose you go for the afforestations. Private entities, if they are involved in the carrying out the afforestation process, obviously to be considered as a forestry activity. But do you think immediately they will get the green credit? No, after 5 years, if it maintains around how much? 40% of the canopy. One green credit equals to what? One new tree over 5 years. How much? 5 years. 5 years if it is sustainable, and because of that, here what? We will be planting what? Indigenous trees. Indigenous and endemic trees. वहाँ का जो local जो trees होता है. Otherwise, it cannot sustain over there. Credits are non-tradable, non-transferable, and may be exchanged, but cannot be reused. Now, about the green credit program, it is an innovative market-based mechanism to encourage voluntary plantations activity for afforestation and water conservation. It is an initiative within the Lifestyle for Environment Life Movement Conference of Party 26. Mission Life 2020, India led global mass movement to nudge individuals and community actions to protect and preserve the environment. It encourages of government entities, private companies, NGOs, individual groups of individuals registered under Societies Registration Act. Now they will get the green credit. We have what 8 headings are there. The 8 avenues under the green credit: tree plantations, water management, sustainable agriculture, waste management, air pollution reductions, mangrove conservations, eco-mark level development, sustainable building and infrastructure. So how it is correlated? We have discussed this. One Sanrakshan Evam Samvardhanam Aviniyam 2026. In fact, the 2026 reclassification was designed specifically to bridge the gap between Forest Act and the Green Credit Program itself. Looking at the Green Credit Program itself, what Supreme Court intervened, and because of that, we have the latest guidelines. Previously, if a company restored the forest land, it was viewed as a commercial lease, non-forestry, requiring the company to pay NPV, and apart from that, they have to carry out the what? Compensatory afforestation. In January 2026, guideline changed this way by starting reclassification. That means what? Now this afforestation, it will be granted what? As a considered as a forestry activity. Direct result, because it is a forestry activity, companies are exempted for paying NPV and do not need compensatory afforestation. Green credit linkage. This reclassified activity qualifies the company to apply for green credit under green credit rules if those forestry activities they have been carried out in accordance with the state management plan. तो एक क्वेश्चन इस पे बन सकता है, ठीक है? Okay, solve this question. क्या होगा आंसर? कृष्ण भगवान अर्जुन से कहते हैं मन की रास को ना थामे रखो, मन जो है बहुत चंचल है ना, पढ़ते पढ़ते मन कहीं खो जाता है, इसलिए कृष्ण भगवान कहते हैं कि मन की रास को थाम के रखो, मन को कंट्रोल करना बहुत ज्यादा डिफिकल्ट है। और पढ़ाई के लिए मन की रास मतलब मन जो है ना घोड़ा है, घोड़ा समझते हो ना आपने, घोड़ा को देखा है, हॉर्स को, जब हॉर्स सड़क पे दौड़ता है तो उसको ऐसे लगा दिया जाता है, क्यों? क्योंकि वो रास्ते में फोकस करे तो ऐसे से देखते रहेगा। उसी प्रकार से मन है, तो जिस प्रकार से घोड़े को थाम के रखा जाता है, उससे मन के भी रास को थाम के रखा जाता है। और यूपीएससी के लिए बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है मन की रास को थाम। ठीक है, चलिए क्या होगा, क्या होगा इसका आंसर? Under the with reference to the this rules 2023 and January 2000 guidelines, consider the following statement: afforestation and ecological restoration undertaken by the private entities now legally classified as forest activity. ठीक है, true. The green credit rules were notified under the Forest Conservation Act to provide statute based on market-based system carbon credit. Thing true है. As per 26 guideline, the private entity is permitted to use green credit to meet the site-specific restoration obligations mandated during the initial forest clearance of forest. This statement is wrong. यहाँ पे क्या लिखा हुआ है? Meet the site-specific restoration. Site-specific restoration. For example, generally what happens? Suppose if you are developing a particular industry over there, so obviously what? There is a site-specific restoration. You will see if you go to any sort of industry to get ISO 14001. This is what? This is being given for what? Conservation of environment. Suppose I have to set an industry over there, so you can see that near the industry we have to create a particular forest. For particular forest, then only you will get ISO 14001. And after that, we have to what? We have to go for what? Giving NPV for that, so that what? Compensatory afforestation can be created. So यहाँ पे लिखा हुआ है, as per the 2026 guideline, the private entities permitted to use green credit to meet site-specific restoration. No, site-specific restoration they have to carry on. They have to carry out. जहाँ पे if you are developing the industry over here, I have to develop a green cover over there. Green cover over there. So this is site-specific. So this is mandatory. It cannot be avoided. You will show that yes, I have carry out the afforestation process on the degraded land, and because of that now I have 5,500 kg, that is 500 to equivalent. Now I here in this particular industry itself मैं generate नहीं कर सकता. Wrong होगा ना? Because कहीं भी if you are developing certain industry, because of industrial emissions, temperature is very high over there, and because of that under ISO 14001 you have to create the tree cover over. So this is mandatory. That will be given what? अगर आपको suppose if you have given कि you have to develop around 2,000 number of trees, it has to be developed. So there you will say I have 500 credits, I will develop only how much? 1,500. तो ये statement क्या होगा? गलत हो जाएगा. As per 2026 law, private entities permitted to use the green credit rules 2023 are notified under Forest Conservation Act to 1980 to provide a statutory basis for the market based exchange. इसका amendment act है ना, Forest Amendment Credit rules. It is notified under Environmental Protection Act होगा ना, 1986. The statement this is also wrong. This is also wrong. So it will be one only. Yes, one only. Okay, now. Input notified under Environmental Protection Act 1986. Okay, take it. I was confused. This is, go through it. Under the revised methodology of the Green Credit Program, effective this one, which of the following criteria must be satisfied for the entry for an entity to exchange green credit for the compensatory afforestation? First is what? A minimum restoration period 5 years, ठीक है? Canopy 40%, ठीक है? The restoration of a cumulative minimum of 25 hectares. This is important. Otherwise, they will carry out what? Restoration on fragmented lands. The use of mixed indigenous species based on the site-specific suitability. This is also what we have discussed. True. Then only they will sustain for a 5 year. So all the four statements they are correct. They go through this topic. This is not important so much. Okay. This carbon capture and utilization important. Carbon capture and utilization, write it down. 2026. We talk about what? That we under NDCs, what we have to do, we are trying to limit the greenhouse gases emissions so that global warming can be controlled or regulated. Now, the most important aspect is what? Carbon dioxide. It is responsible for 60% of the global warming. Now, we have certain technologies are there from which what we can directly capture the carbon dioxide, it will develop into product. Capturing carbon dioxide and developing into product. ठीक है ना? Capturing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and developing into what? Product. That is called a carbon capture and utilization. ठीक है ना? So यहाँ देख सकते हैं. Set of technologies that allow for the capture and use of carbon as a feedstock for making essential products such as fuels, chemicals, while the predominantly derived from the fossil resources. So first is what? It's of two type. First is your direct utilization. Means what? It will be directly utilized. For example, specific purpose, enhanced oil recovery, residual oil from the aging wall. Suppose there are aging walls are there. There you can put what? Compressed carbon dioxide, and from this compressed carbon dioxide, the residual oils, it can be what? Recovered. Global context, most mature and the commercially dominant CCU method. Food and beverage industries. Carbonated drinks, dry ice. You must be knowing about the dry ice. Dry ice is what? Solid carbon dioxide. It is being used in the industries for the purpose of extinguishing fire. So what? We capture the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and go for what? Cryogenically cooling it. So we have the direct utilization of carbon dioxide and getting it converted into what? Dry ice. Fire suppression, carbon dioxide based fire extinguisher. Medical and farm solvent for drug manufacturing, used in supercritical state, carbon dioxide high precision extraction. So these are the what? Direct. That means what? Directly carbon dioxide, it can be sequestered from the atmosphere and it will be used in the developing certain products. Carbon dioxide to product, chemical and biological pathway, chemical synthesis, methanol, formic acid, urea. Tata Steel and NTPC have operational methanol pilot plants. So from the what? We will develop methanol. Mineralization, green concrete bricks aggregates, only method that permanently locks carbon dioxide into solid mineral forms. Biological, biofuels, animal feed, pigments, uses photosynthesis to convert industrial fuel into biomass. Okay. We have discussed about the methane emissions. Global methane place, Conference of Party 26. India is not a participatory in India. 40% it's coming from your agricultural side itself, and because of that we haven't signed global methane place. So global methane states report 2025 released by United Environment Program with climate and clear coalitions found methane atmospheric concentration has more than doubled since pre-industrial times 2020. It was founded in this Climate and Clean Air Coalition 2022, convened with this much. It is a voluntary partnership with more than 162 government, intergovernmental. India joined in 2019. It works to reduce powerful but short-lived climate pollutant, methane, black carbon, hydrofluorocarbons, troposphere ozone that drive both climate change and air pollutions. Let's remember it. Okay. Methane as a greenhouse gases we have discussed. Methane is what? The second biggest contributor towards global warming. And when you talk about the global warming potential, it is how much? 80. Major sources, 60% from the human activities, agriculture, fossil fuels, landfilling waste. 40% the emissions from the natural process with wetlands as the largest one. Agricultural, सबसे पहला क्या? Agriculture. And second when you talk about the natural process में कौन सा है? Wetlands. Other sources what? Glacial fracking. India is the world's third largest methane emitter, primarily driven by stubble burning after China and United States. So this is the chart of India. Okay, 40% from the agricultural side. Glacier preservations. We have discussed that in science and technology. What we have discussed, we have Pag Nisar mission for the purpose of measuring the cryosphere. And when this cryosphere, जब cryosphere की बात करेंगे, it is monitored. We have seen that it is melting at a very faster rate. One of the major contributors is what? Because of black soot particles, black carbon particles. Because black carbon particles, when they are deposited over the cryosphere, what will happen? Cryosphere is known for their albedo. That means what? 98% of the solar radiation they have been reflected back. But those black soot particles, they will be what? Absorbing the solar radiation. Because of that, the glaciers they are melting, and because now we are thinking of glacier preservations. So Nepal Yala glacier was recently declared dead after it shrunk by 66% since 1970s. Other major glacier declared dead is Pizol Glacier, Switzerland's, Clark Glacier, USA, Ioloko Glacier, Mexico. India first funeral was held in Ozukul Glacier in Iceland 2019. Consequences of glacier: reduced glacier will have less albedo effect, therefore will increase heat absorption also. Obviously, if you talk about suppose glaciers where they are being developed, glaciers where they are at an altitude of around 6,000 meter itself. Suppose if this particular percentage has been completely covered with the cryosphere, obviously what will happen? Because of the albedo effect, they will be reflected. But consider, suppose this is the particular portion, we do not have the ice cover, ice sheet over there. What will happen? Albedo effect, it won't be there, and because of that, what will happen? That particular heat portion, that particular portion of the heat, it will get heated up, and because of those heat, what will happen? The adjacent cryospheric region, they will also get melted. Melting glacier will have caused nearly 2 centimeter global sea level rise since 2002 2001. Nearly 3/4 of the Earth's fresh water is stored in glacier. Increased risk of glacial like outburst, flood, and avalanches. So, see, most of the important things we have completed. The most important, see, from here, what are the things that we have to go, that we have to remember? We have discussed each and everything, but most important is what? Paris Agreement. You have to remember what is Paris Agreement, what are the different articles under Paris Agreement, each and everything you have to correlate. And along with this article, you must correlate those articles, they are being derived from which Conference of Party? Conference of Party 29 or Conference of Party 30. For example, Conference of Party 29, it talks about Article 6.2 and 6.4 itself. So that you have to remember. Conference of Party 29, you have to remember. Conference of Party 30, you have to remember. How to remember Conference of Party 30, I have discussed. That are the 6 or 7 points you have to remember. After that, you have to use your general logic. You phase out, it is not possible. Transitioning away, है ना, उस टाइप का लॉजिक आपको याद रखना है. So with this, we complete our environment. The rest portion that is being left, either I will be recording it or else I will plan 1 week trip over here and I will complete it. Okay, na? So thank you. Thanks, doctor.